Ladies and gentlemen, the Midwest Technology Summit will begin in 5 minutes. Once again, the Midwest Technology Summit will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Midwest Technology Summit will begin in 1 minute. Please take your seats. Once again, the Midwest Technology Summit will begin in 1 minute. Please take your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Shannon Full.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. It's great to see all of you out there in the audience today, those online. We're really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. Artificial intelligence, AI, can generate content, analyze data, and complete tasks faster than most of us could have ever imagined just a few years ago. But it cannot create this. It can't create the opportunity to bring people together, learning, exchanging ideas, and building relationships. It also cannot replace a meaningful conversation in the hallway, a new connection made over coffee, or the spark that happens when the right people come together around this shared opportunity. AI can definitely optimize our work. It can streamline processes and give us better information, but it cannot replace the human element of the work we do or the communities we are working to strengthen. What it can do is create more time for us to be human. That might be the greatest opportunity. By harnessing AI thoughtfully, we can become more efficient, more strategic, and essentially more present, freeing ourselves to focus on creativity, leadership, and relationships that no technology can replace. And one of the most powerful expressions of that human element is partnership, the collaboration, investment, and ongoing support that make gatherings like this possible and advance so much of the Chamber's work. One final reminder before we begin, we encourage your participation throughout the summit. If you have questions for any of our speakers or panelists, you can submit them using the chamberquestions.com or scan your QR codes on your tables. This really has worked really well for us. Those online will submit them through chamberquestions.com. Those of you here, just scan that QR code and submit your questions. We'll incorporate as many audience questions as we possibly can throughout the morning. As we look at everything we're going to talk about this morning, there's a reason we're starting with infrastructure. Because when most of us think about AI, we don't immediately think about power lines, broadband, or data centers. We think about the tools, the possibilities of what AI means for our businesses, our schools, our healthcare systems, and the way in which we all work. But none of that happens without something much more fundamental behind it. AI, as we all know, needs power, connectivity, computing capacity, and it needs the physical infrastructure capable of supporting all of it. In other words, before we can fully realize the promise of AI, we have to build the foundation underneath it. And that creates a pretty significant opportunity for our region. The Midwest has many of the ingredients needed to play a major role in what comes next. But having those advantages isn't enough. We need to understand what investments are needed, what decisions need to be made today, and what all of this could mean for business, workforce, and communities of tomorrow. So what will it take? To help us answer that, we have an outstanding panel of leaders who are quite literally helping build power, and connect with infrastructure behind the AI economy. Before I get to that, I'll just say, once again, we're so excited that you're all here. Thanks to the tremendous sponsors, our team that put the group, all the content together. And so we're going to start this off. Please welcome Seth Arndorfer, the CEO of Dakota Carrier Network, Paul Mathis, President and CEO of Cass County Electric Cooperative, Martin Vega, Jr., the Director of Community Operations for Applied Digital, and moderating the conversation is Tammy Norgard, attorney at Vogel Law Firm and leader in advancing the legal and policy frameworks related to technology and data center investment. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage.
All right, good morning. Thanks so much for being here to learn a little bit more about AI. I'm sure any of you who have been listening to the radio, reading the newspaper, it seems like it's kind of the hot topic right now. I am Tammy Norgard. I am an attorney at the Vogel Law Firm. I was really excited to be asked to moderate the panel today. I've had a variety of different ways I've been involved in AI. I've worked with Applied Digital in Ellendale on the facility. I work with Cass County Electric and have helped Cass County Electric, Minn Kota, and Applied Digital on an energy service agreement at the Harwood facility. I work on water supply in western North Dakota. Usually it's been domestic water supply and fracking. There's a lot of interest in data center development out there, so I've had some engagement with the water infrastructure. And then I'm from McKenzie County. I've got a lot of friends and neighbors from McKenzie County that have called me saying, hey, there's some data center developers that want to buy some land or get an option on land. So I feel like I've been on all sides of this, so I have at least some interesting perspectives. We have a great panel. I want to kick this off by setting the stage a little bit and having Martin Vega just talk a little bit about Applied Digital coming to North Dakota and to tell us why AI is important, not only to North Dakota, but to the people around the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tammy, and good morning, everybody. Really happy to be up here and have these, educational conversations where we explain a little bit about Applied Digital and how we really selected North Dakota as our primary foundation and our building ground to launch our first AI factory. So when you consider the development of AI and the levels of compute that have to be processed to achieve the end result, you look at several different components. I think the first and most important component is the electrical capacity. And so North Dakota has historically been a national net exporter of power, and that it made it really attractive for the data center industry. When you can come into an area that has, the generation of power available in large quantities, it allows for us to be more successful and create feasible opportunities for our tenants from an environmental standpoint and also from just an electrical compute standpoint. And so when you consider the world of AI and what AI truly means, it's important to really distinguish the importances of AI and what that truly entails for industry partners and business leaders. There's the misconception that AI is just, a lot of generated images or a lot of malicious intent, or, you hear about iRobot and think that, AI is associated to that level of danger or hazards. But you fail to remember that AI is also going to be the leading factor behind medical data research, behind automation, manufacturing, innovation, and workforce development in many different areas. And so AI is one of those things that needs to be understood from a component of how can we utilize this to benefit our society, and how can we understand how to regulate AI to make sure that the positives and the pros of what we're doing are essentially created into a more wide stream network to allow for end users to have that ability to utilize the AI, right? And so we'll talk a little bit more about the AI infrastructure in North Dakota and what the economic benefits have looked like. But it's important for us to understand that our business model is unique in the way of bringing in new levels of innovation, and North Dakota has been a great foundation for us to establish that.
Great. Thanks so much, Martin. I'll move to Paul next. Just to talk about, Paul is the CEO of Cass County Electric. He's been instrumental in negotiating the energy service agreement to provide power to Applied Digital. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about that process and how you approached, because energy is obviously a really big issue with AI data centers, and how did you approach that from Cass County Electric's perspective?
Sure, thank you, Tammy, and good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. For us, it's, so just to put this into perspective on the magnitude of this project, Cass County Electric is a distribution cooperative that we serve about 10 counties in the southeast part of the state. We are under the Minn Kota Power Cooperative family. They are what I call our G&T, our wholesale power provider. To put this into perspective, we are about a 280 megawatt distribution cooperative. This data center, Applied Digital, the first tranche is about 280 megawatts. So it's a really big deal. To put that into perspective, for the industry terms, a large hospital in town that's about 1 million square feet is 4.5 megawatts. So I just want to put that into perspective for everyone on the magnitude of this project. So a lot goes into that. The first step is if we're going to serve them, they have went through the process of permitting through the federal, state, and local. They have their permitting. It's not our responsibility to make sure they're doing everything correctly. Once they come to the table with us, they've already have that established. Now, the next step for us is to do the intense distribution and transmission engineering studies to find out where we can feasibly serve a load of that magnitude without disrupting service to our members, without affecting not only the rates, but affecting the reliability. So we put a lot of time and energy into the engineering to ensure we're putting there where it's not going to be disruptive, and there's a cost to that. So we have a large load interconnection process and an application that there's some merit to that. There's some teeth to that where there's an application fee, and then there's fees to do the continued studies to find out where we can put them. And that is all paid for by Applied Digital. So all the work that we do on the engineering side of it is not backed by our members, it's backed by Applied Digital. So that's step one, is just to figure out where we can put them and not interrupt service or affect our traditional members negatively.
So usually when you're setting your rates, you're looking at what your cost of operation is, and you spread it among all of your users. And so in this case, with Applied Digital coming in, there's perhaps going to be an increase in capital costs and putting the infrastructure in. And when you're saying that Applied Digital is paying for that, is there going to be an impact on the ratepayers?
Yeah, we get that question a lot, and so we're a very capital-intensive business. So to build, they're going to have their own substation, extend on the transmission, some transmission line upgrades, all that come a very hefty cost. All that is being paid for 100% by Applied Digital. We are not capitalizing that across the membership. So that's really the step one on the capital side, that we're not spreading that out amongst the ratepayers and the other members.
And in fact, I think there's been some studies that have said, at least in North Dakota, the residential power bills should actually go down or have gone down, especially around Ellendale, because there was some stranded power there that wasn't being utilized. And so actually it's been a benefit to those consumers. Do you have a sense of whether that could similarly be experienced in the Cass County Electric jurisdiction?
Yeah, a couple of things there. It's a completely different situation on the one in Ellendale. That is done through MDU, and they're sleeving that through the market. So it's operating a little differently on how we're going to do it. As far as the rate decline, we're not going to see a decrease in rates, but we're not going to see an increase in rates that's directly related to the data center. On the benefit side, a couple of things with capital credits that we've Applied Digital has agreed to. We're a cooperative, so we give back excess revenue called margins back to our members in the form of capital credits. Applied Digital has agreed to a little bit different structure where we're going to retire those capital credits early at a discount, and they're going to give those capital credits back into the communities. A couple different ways that we're looking at, and still working with Martin and his crew through Operation Roundup or through an endowment fund. So those capital credits typically go back to the member, and it's their money. Applied Digital, because they're good stewards to the community, have agreed to give those back. And so that's where you'll see a direct impact and a direct benefit from the cooperative.
One last question for you, just on setting the stage. Do we have enough power? In this case, you said you're a 280 megawatt cooperative. You're going to double your service with one customer to add another 280. Do we have enough power?
The short answer is yes. So we look at two things. Do we have the energy, and do we have the capacity? So we typically, I'll talk about the energy side first. Typically, we're long in energy. We're usually selling into a market, sometimes in a depressed market, sometimes we're making money. So we have the energy to serve them. We have secured that with some other financial hedges through bilateral contracts. We have some other large contracts that have expired. We have some more generation coming back on our, what we call our Square Boot, our Young 2 operating station out in center. So yes, on the energy, and on the capacity, there's already a little bit of freeboard on the transmission lines that we're taking advantage. Now, as we build out, as they want to grow, that will require a build out of assets, a build out of generation if they want to continue to grow, past that first 6 years. Cass County Electric and the Minn Kota family is right now in the stage of looking at replacing our legacy assets that provide energy to our members today. All those assets, traditionally what's keeping the lights on even in this building today is primarily our coal-fired assets out in center. They're beginning to age. They were built in the early 70s. They're set to expire early 2040s, 2041, 2042. So we are in the process of planning new generation and preparing our members for the next 50 years like this they did for us in the early 70s. There's a hefty cost to that. As you can imagine, building new generation, just for an example, if we're evaluating all options, every option that's on the table. I'll just give you an example to build out a new natural gas simple cycle plant at a 450 megawatts with the land and everything is close to $1 billion. Now Now, all that will have to be paid for, and that's outside of you guys what the data center may require. So the data center, if they want to grow, is also going to look at building out a set of assets. If we can do that together, where Applied Digital would pay for their portion of it, 100%, our members eventually are going to have to pay for our generation just through the economy of scale. So, for example, a 450 megawatt plant's about $1 billion to build. If we build another one right alongside of it, there's a 25% cost savings. If you build another one alongside of that, an additional 25%. So we can take half of that and drive down the CapEx cost for our traditional members. So we are already in the point where we're going to build, procure, and come online a new generation for our members. And they're going to have to pay for that. If we can leverage Applied Digital to help drive down those CapEx costs, that is going to drive down the pressure on our rates. And I want to be clear, I'm not up here telling you today that your rates aren't going to go up, because there's a tremendous amount of pressure on rates for all things that we just talked about. And we are leveraging Applied Digital to help drive down those costs for our members today and tomorrow.
Great. All right, Seth, we'll move on to you now. I want you to tell the audience a little bit more about what fiber's in place, how well North Dakota is prepared, and what the challenges are to bring AI data centers in with fiber.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. So I'm Seth Arndorfer. I'm the CEO of DCN, or Dakota Carrier Network, and we are an LLC that was formed by the independent rural broadband service providers that cover about 98% of the state's geography. North Dakota is unique in the fact that we have been very aggressive in getting fiber deployed to every corner of the state. And so from a fiber deployment standpoint, we have, and we're actually, by the end of this year, likely going to be the first state in the country to have gigabit internet access to every household, every serviceable address in the state. So as the data centers started looking at North Dakota, because we have fiber deployment heavy, we have abundant energy, we have an attractive climate, it makes perfect sense. So when we started talking with these hyperscalers that are looking at coming to North Dakota, at first we were like, hey, we're perfectly positioned. But the issue that we found, and one of the challenges that we found, is the capacity. And similar to what Paul was saying, the capacity that DCN has running across its network today, connecting all of the state government locations, whether it be the K-12 schools, higher education, public safety, state radio, the regional banks for their banking transactions, electronic medical records, all of that data traffic. We had our first hyperscale customer that was requesting to basically use up as much capacity as all of those anchor institutions that we're serving today. So the balance is not only having fiber, but the amount of capacity that they need on that network. And it's been a good opportunity for us. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for North Dakota and the service providers that are connecting to the data centers. We're a little bit different on the telecommunications side, where they want carrier diversity. They want two different providers for redundancy, whereas in the power side, they have one power provider, and then they find other redundancy alternatives, whether it's generators or batteries for their power redundancy. We do it through diverse fiber connections into the data center facility. And so what we are looking at right now as DCN, and we've just announced it, is we're actually increasing our capacity from North Dakota out to the major metropolitan areas where the next hyperscale data center is for that hyperscale customer. It might be Minneapolis, it might be Cheyenne, it might be Chicago, and it might be Denver. And so we've partnered with, in Wyoming, Range Communications, who's going to construct a high-capacity fiber line from Denver up through Cheyenne and to Baker, and then DCN will construct from Baker up through the Bakken, down through the center and Bismarck area, extending it on over to Fargo and Ellendale, and then it'll end in Minneapolis. where we will then hand off to Wisconsin Independent Networks. It's a state fiber network similar. Those are state fiber networks like DCN in Minneapolis. They will build from Minneapolis to Chicago. And that's really going to do a lot, not only to serve the hyperscale industry, but it's also going to serve every anchor institution that we are serving today as they deploy AI and as their data needs continue to grow, that we can leverage that investment to serve North Dakota into the future.
You heard Paul talk about the fact that at Cass County Electric, they wanted to make sure that all of the upfront infrastructure costs were paid by Applied Digital in this particular energy service agreement. How is DCN addressing that? I mean, you're talking about building a phenomenal amount of infrastructure, doubling your capacity. How are you funding that? And are you relying on industry to help?
It's been a blend. DCN is negotiating contracts with the hyperscalers to pay a portion of that upfront. They're not paying 100% of that upfront, and then they're paying the remainder of it over a longer term period. And that's really how we've structured the pricing.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about just public-private partnerships, basically, or collaboration. Are there public-private partnership opportunities out there? If so, how are you engaging them? I'll start with Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that public and private partnerships definitely exist today, and they're extremely important. I think they're the foundation of creating a successful industry in new communities, because you need to make sure that everybody's sitting at the same table and having active conversations, right? And so when you consider the industry as a whole, most industry is going to be considered, the private sector of being able to come into new communities and develop, what's considered the largest capital projects that most of these communities have ever seen. And so in order to be effective in developing these projects and ensuring that, you're considering all things, right, whether it's both positive and negative impacts to the community, you've got to strengthen and solidify those public and private partnerships. And you've got to make sure that everybody at the table understands what the true benefits and impacts are of all of these projects and of the industry as a whole, right? And so when we come in and we build our projects, before we actually break ground, before a shovel hits the dirt, we locate all of those public stakeholders and we locate the partnerships that strategically need to be implemented and enforced so that we can come in and make sure that we're considering all things, so that we can provide the utmost benefits. When we built in Ellendale, North Dakota, and we located that area that had the surplus power, where we recognized that it was going to be a positive net factor to all the local ratepayers due to the credits that were going to be able to be given back, that happened at the same table with the public and private partnership stakeholders that had those conversations of, if we're dealing with an area that has these resources and has these opportunities, how do we work together to maximize those opportunities and those resources? And it's considered all things, right? So we talk a lot about electrical capacity and power and the surplus that's available, but we also look at it from a water perspective, right? And so most communities that we build in, ask the same question every time we build is what is the water impact going to look like? And so because we've been able to strengthen those partnerships and have the productive conversations, we've created innovative designs that have allowed for us to be very low water consumers by implementing a closed loop cooling system that essentially harvests the most important resource in the state of North Dakota, which is water, right? So we look at all of our agricultural partners in the areas that we build in and recognize that we as an industry don't want to come in and create negative implications to all of our neighbors and all of our industry partners that are around us. And so we can have those active communications by sitting at the same table, by implementing public-private partnerships. So I think they strongly exist, they need to exist, and I think that's the key to making sure that the industry is successful.
One of the things when you're talking about water, that is something that's always in the news about data centers are going to take all the water. We probably have less of that here in North Dakota than in drier areas like communities that rely on the Colorado River, California, Arizona. And I just wanted to highlight that Applied Digital is they're incorporating a different method than a lot of those data centers. So when you hear the hype about, data centers are going to, suck our aquifers dry and suck our rivers dry, maybe just to highlight a little bit on why you're different.
Yeah, absolutely. So water is a really important topic to all of us. And Tammy, as you mentioned, it becomes the number one topic that we hear about when we develop new projects and when we go into new communities and have conversations about, data center development and AI infrastructure, the biggest question we get from all of the local constituents is, are you going to take all of my water, and what's going to happen to our aquifer, and what's going to happen to our drinking water and to our water supply? And so Seth had made a comment about North Dakota's ambient temperature, right, and the kind of the cold environment that North Dakota produces. And so with Applied Digital, we've created a closed-loop cooling system that allows for us to maximize the ambient temperature of North Dakota to cool our facility. And so in essence, the way that you can consider that is almost like the radiator of your car, where you're using a closed-loop system that is just continuing to recirculate. You never have that fluid that ever leaves the system, right? So you've got very low water loss, and you're a very low water consumer. And then you utilize that ambient temperature of the airflow to cool that liquid that comes out of the facility. So in essence, the liquid goes inside of the facility. It makes contact with our heat sinks and with the GPUs. That liquid then comes out of the facility through the exterior, still maintained in that closed-loop system and in the piping. And then it goes through our dry cooling systems, which are essentially just pieces of equipment designed to suction all the airflow and suction the ambient temperature of North Dakota. So on the coldest hour of the coldest day, we can actually shut off all of our cooling systems that are designated inside the facility and just utilize the ambient temperature of the exterior. And this makes our design very unique because we don't have to come in and utilize large water quantities. We don't have to come in and be large consumers of water. We don't have to tap into aquifers. And so in Ellendale, our demand that we have currently, or our availability of water, is only 15 gallons per minute, right? So we're only tapped into a 2-inch line that comes in off of the local utility water source. So even if we wanted to be large consumers of water, we wouldn't have the availability to do that. And so that's why creating this unique design where we can use the resources that are available in the state become very efficient for us to be able to create these environments where we're curtailing back electrical capacity and electrical loads and utilizing the resources that exist.
And when you're, go ahead.
I think the other thing I want to mention is most people don't realize it, but we have had data centers in North Dakota. DCN has a data center in Bismarck, one in Fargo, and they both facilities utilize the same closed loop cooling. We use no more water than our next door neighbor, any business that is our neighboring business. So the one thing I've offered to, whether it's stakeholders and we talk about public-private partnerships, DCN has been working with the state of North Dakota since the year 2000 for connectivity and data center for their normal compute and network-based firewalling, and back when we had video bridging, before we had Teams. All of that infrastructure resides in our data centers, and I've offered to our politicians, our stakeholders, county commissioners, to come and tour our facility and actually see what a closed loop system is, what it looks like, how it works. Martin has offered that as well, and I would please encourage you to, if you want to, reach out to us, get a tour, or if you have people that are skeptical, come and actually see it and touch it and feel it. It's in and it's operational already.
And that is something that I know there's been some articles. Rob Port had an article a couple weeks ago where he was saying, there's good data centers and there's bad data centers. And there's examples of a good approach to siting, location, community engagement, and there's examples of poor siting and community engagement. And with that closed loop system that you both have been talking about, like that is something that came up in that, saying that you guys are, it might be more expensive to do that, to implement that technology, but definitely gave you kudos for being proactive and keeping that concern out of the dialogue. So I think that's great too. Martin, you mentioned that you engage with the community and the community leaders to provide some kind of benefit. Can you give us specific examples of what Applied Digital is doing, has done, is supporting in Ellendale and Harwood? Like, what things are you actually doing? Who are you donating money to? Who are you supporting? Or what public initiatives are you engaging in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I could probably spend the next 8 hours up here talking to you guys about all of the community integration that we've implemented with Applied Digital in the last couple of years, because we really pride ourselves in making sure that we're working with the community and that we're looking at the avenues to be good partners, good neighbors, and having those active conversations. And so our biggest philosophy is that everybody deserves a seat at the table, whether it's the local farmer that lives a half-mile away or whether it's city council members that have questions on our projects. And so we've done a couple of things that I highlight that have created a positive relationship in the community. One of those things is that for every community that we build in, we hire a community engagement coordinator. And what that is that's just an individual that gets to actually live in that community and serve that community directly every day, so that if there are any questions, if there's a farmer that has some concern at 8 p.m., they know exactly who to call, they know who to talk to, and that person's in an area where they can go and respond to that. They can go and meet with that individual, meet with the farmer, meet with the city, and have those conversations. But the other benefit is that the community engagement coordinator lives in that community, so they also get to understand firsthand what potential impacts may be of our data center project. And so one example in Ellendale is our community engagement coordinator there the other day had sat there and said, hey, we've got a little bit of traffic that goes through the main street. We should try to divert it through a different area to try to lessen the congestion of traffic. And that was a great idea, right? So they can see firsthand all of the issues that we need to implement to make sure that we're being good neighbors and that we're considering the impacts of the community. And to add a second perspective on it, when we first came into Ellendale, it was a rural community that didn't really have a lot of resources, right? So we had got in, and the only restaurant in town had actually just recently closed down. And so we're building a $1 billion project in a community that didn't have the resources or the amenities that we needed to supply our workforce. And so what we started doing is we started to figure out ways to strategically invest into the community, to build the community up, whether it's helping new restaurants come into the community, building 20 single-family homes. We're on project right now to build a 40-unit apartment complex for the community of Ellendale, or in the community of Ellendale. And so it's a lot of those conversations of how do we create a community that is enjoyable for our workforce so that we can create that level of retention. And then the last thing that I'll note is that recently Applied Digital created an organization called Applied Digital Cares. And what it is it's a nonprofit organization that donates money into areas that are essentially critical to local communities. And so what we've done is we didn't want to direct where the funding would go that Applied Digital wanted to donate to the community. So we've actually opened the doors for community members to apply for grants and come in and tell us where they need that funding and what is critical in the community. And so just this last round of community grants that we awarded in the spring of 2026, we awarded a little over $650,000 worth of grants across 3 different communities. And the biggest donation that we made was to the School of Ellendale. I was talking to the superintendent. He mentioned to me, he said, hey, all of our students are having issues with their technology and with their laptops. It's decreasing their efficiencies because of the fact that they're using outdated equipment. And so Applied Digital came in and donated $177,000 to ensure that all of the students had new laptops for this upcoming school year. And so it's stories like that that we have that allow for us to continue to build the great partnerships in the community. And we truly do spend a lot of time and a lot of effort in making sure that the community's voices are always heard.
I think to piggyback on that, so DRN ReadyTech is in Ellendale. They're the DCN owner company that serves that market. And because of the increase in people moving into Ellendale, they have now rolled out a daycare. And that's a huge benefit and a huge challenge for some of these small towns. And that business plan, maybe even just to make it break even, wouldn't have been possible without an Applied Digital coming in and having enough, critical mass. So there are benefits, and including broadband. They've had an increase in broadband subscribers moving in, people moving into their community. They hadn't seen that for several years. So the benefit to that local broadband service provider have been recognized as well.
And I think it's important to note, like with the chamber, I'm on the chamber board, and some of our biggest issues that we're trying to help address at the legislature is how do we deal with workforce challenges like housing and childcare. And I think it's great to hear these stories that, we look at how Applied Digital is helping with those things by building housing, building houses, building apartment buildings. I think I even heard you helped do something, underwrite some cost of mortgages or helping making the housing more affordable, and then hearing that you're helping with developing childcare in the area. We would love to see more of that across the region to assist with workforce. I think that's something really important to highlight. I think we hear a lot, there's lots of media about data centers, some truthful, some not, some well-founded, some not. And it also depends on, I think there's bad actors out there that probably cause concern for data center development, but you can't really paint everybody with a broad brush. I would ask all of you, and I'll maybe start with Paul, when you kind of hear some of this rhetoric in the media about data centers, and I say rhetoric, some of it's well-founded, some of it's not. What frustrates you, or what are the biggest misconceptions of AI as it relates to your industry?
One of them, I think, we addressed it already, is will this cause blackouts or brownouts, or will my reliability suffer because we're putting this large load in place? And we've addressed that. The answer is no. The other really big one for us is, will this drive our rates up? And I think that's also, we've proven to be a myth. We're under my leadership, and we have 9 board of directors at the cooperative. Since day one, their directive to me and staff has been, if we're going to serve this, it's not going to negatively affect our members. And that's the only way we can do this. So we're mitigating the risk and maximizing the benefits. One quick thing here I'll address. One question that came up on alternative energy resources, meeting the significant energy demands of data centers, and what opportunities do you see for incorporating them into future projects? I did forget to mention, inside of our portfolio, the Minn Kota portfolio already very diverse, with about 259 megawatts of wind. In part of that I talked about with dealing with the growth and dealing with the data centers, we are adding in 2027 370 megawatts of wind, the Flickertail Wind Project out by New Rockford. Potentially half of that will bifurcate, half of that and dedicate to data, and half of that to our legacy members.
Seth?
Misinformation. I don't think and I'm not disappointed with this, but there's more misinformation related to water and electricity, not so much on the network. I think that's been kind of what people don't realize is such a critical investment element. But from DCN's perspective, I would say the same as Paul. We're approaching this opportunity with eyes wide open and making sure that it actually benefits our existing stakeholders from a rate consistency and an access to increased capacity and to AI that won't have any negative impacts to our existing stakeholders. That's our priority.
Martin?
Yeah, the misinformation topic is interesting, because I think that's what I spend a lot of time on, is having these productive conversations. And so when you look at the misinformation and where the generation of misinformation comes from, there's a lot of different scenarios, but the biggest factor is social media, right? And so social media has been very infamous for producing misinformation and essentially having a lot of questions that get asked to a lot of data center partners in regards to, what does your water usage look like? What does your electrical consumption look like? Paul mentioned it. Are we going to see blackouts? Are we going to see rates increase because of data center development? And so our job at Applied Digital has really been to create that level of educational conversation institution where we can have these productive conversations and we can educate individuals on what our projects look like and how these benefits can be determined off of the misinformation. And so the other critical piece I like to talk about is the delineation behind the development of data centers and what that has looked like historically. Because as Seth had mentioned, data centers are not new in any way, shape, or form, right? Data centers have been around for many, many years. They've been around for credit card transactions, streaming services, website hosting. I mean, this isn't a new topic that we're talking about. However, the style of data center and the level of compute that goes into actually working the new data centers, or the AI factories is what we call them, has changed, right? And so technology will continue to advance. And so when people look up the terminology of data centers, and they go to Google and they type in, how much water does a data center consume, it's very likely that you could be getting information off of traditional data centers or historical data centers that have used evaporative cooling processes and that have utilized large amounts of water to function and be efficient. And so there's an importance behind understanding that all data centers are not the same in regards to the design and the development of how they're structured. And so we do a good job at making sure people understand that an AI factory and the way that it is consuming water at very low efficient rates and all of the other kind of big misinformation topics are addressed by simply educating people on the development and on the technological shifts. And so there's always a lot of misinformation, but it's important for us to have those conversations because I don't think that the misinformation ever goes away unless you're willing to sit there and listen to the misinformation so that you can understand how to be proactive and have a response to the answers.
One of the observations that I've made about data center siting and location is that North Dakota is attractive, as Martin said, because it's cold climate, so cooling costs them less in North Dakota. And I think we're in one of 3 net energy export states, which makes us very attractive. But where the energy is located is important. And so, again, I would do a lot of work in Western North Dakota, and I know, we have all this energy in Western North Dakota, but we lack transmission to get all that capacity out. So we have, some pipelines for natural gas, oil. Natural gas is important here for energy. And so one of the questions that I often raise is, why would you not put more data centers in Western North Dakota where you have all the natural gas and you can't get it out anyway? Or like you did in Ellendale, I think there was some stranded energy there that there wasn't transmission to get out, so it's a perfect location. And yet we don't, the farthest west that we're going, I think, is like center at this point. So are there other challenges in all of your industries for Western North Dakota, where all the energy is? Because it seems like if you build a plant there, you'd have the energy right there. I know the electric utility is building a big pipeline to bring natural gas to Mapleton, so we're going to have new electric generation in an area we need it. But isn't it also appealing to move the data centers further west where there's less population and more energy? Martin, you want to start with that?
Yeah, of course. So when we build our locations, we specifically look for areas that have, an abundance of power or surplus energy. And so when we built in Ellendale, North Dakota, when we first started to understand what our true design could look like there, we looked at the surplus energy, and there was over 2 gigawatts of stranded power that was being generated in that area that was essentially not being consumed. And so for a large electrical consumer like a data center, this was a perfect and ideal location for us to essentially establish the first layer of our buildings, because we recognized that the power was available, the energy was in fact readily able to be tapped into, and we weren't going to experience the delays of needing to implement new sources of power generation because it already existed. When you look at Western North Dakota a little bit, and I think Paul will do a really good job at explaining what the energy capacity looks like there, but when you look at the western part of North Dakota, you recognize that while there is a lot of power generation that's happening there, it's also a big component that you have to consider from a capacity standpoint, right? And so in order for data centers to come in and be efficient, you need to make sure that the capacity and the energy are available. And so in Western North Dakota, there is a lot of power generation that is currently happening. However, when you consider what's readily available, that becomes an entirely different conversation. And so for data centers right now, we're fulfilling a demand of making sure that we can come in and develop data centers at very rapid rates because of the way that our country is trying to battle from an AI's race perspective. And so we're locating the areas that have the availability first before we locate the areas where we need to come in and build additional generation to supply the services that we need.
All right, Paul, comments?
Yeah, thank you. There's obviously benefits to both, and I'll reiterate again, we're primarily focused on our traditional members, and getting the generation closest to load has several advantages. There's also several advantages of getting that Bakken East pipeline here to the eastern part of the state for other reasons that will benefit the entire region. Transmission is very expensive to build. It's $4 to $5 million a mile. It's far more economical to bring that gas line here. We have support from the North Dakota Industrial Commission, has set aside $500 million over 10 years to help secure that if need be. If there's enough anchor shippers, we may be one of them that would potentially take that gas, then that is definitely a better route to go for us. So for us, we're focusing primarily on our legacy members, bringing the generation closest to that load, alleviate some congestion. At the same time, if we can continue to benefit the growth and serve out Applied Digital, that's just icing on the cake for us.
Seth?
And from a network standpoint, it's not just consuming power. You have to think about it as moving that data. If they're machine learning, whatever it is, it still needs to have connectivity to the next adjacent data center. So from an eastern North Dakota to a western North Dakota, it really comes to they need to get connectivity to 2 different data centers. So if they're going east to Minneapolis or Chicago or west to Denver, it really doesn't matter. We still need to have end-to-end connectivity between all those metros and wherever that data center is being located.
Okay, I want to ask one final question, quick answer. What's the single most important thing that these leaders, community leaders, public and private sector leaders should take into account for the next 12 months to prepare for AI's impact on our region? Seth, do you want to start that one?
Sure, I think, and then I'll tie it into one of these questions about the moratoriums that are being discussed and being considered. And I would say that we have an opportunity as a state to take advantage of an investment that is generational. The investment from DCN standpoint, if we start that investment, which we're already starting to put the fiber in the ground, if a moratorium comes to fruition, that will take our investment and bring it into question. And the hyperscalers, and I can't speak for Martin, but when the conversations that we've been having with the hyperscale developers, they're like, we're looking for states that are open for business. If your state puts a moratorium on, we will move and find generation and find network and find land in another state. And I think we'll look back at it and say, boy, we really missed out on an opportunity.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate, to mitigate the risk, maximize the benefits. And we had the conversation at the table this morning about a potential economic impact study for Applied Digital or for all data centers across our region, and including in the Midwest. I saw a question there. I think as long as we're mitigating that risk, everybody is doing their part. As the cooperatives, I can speak for us, we are very strategic on where we can serve this types of loads and how much that we can serve. There is a limit. It'll self-regulate. We do not have unlimited resources, and at some point we're going to have to build out. And if we mitigate that risk, Applied Digital or whatever data center pays for that capital cost, we're mitigating that risk, and I think that's the key for the cooperatives.
Okay, Martin, quick last word.
Yeah, so I think that, what communities can do to kind of understand this industry and the development is really spend some time on understanding what has already happened and what use case scenarios are out there, and realizing how a community can benefit from a new industry coming into their community. A lot of times we get questions in regards to how can a community prepare itself for a potential industry to come in like this. With all of the jobs that come in, I'd seen a question that got asked, how are we as Applied Digital or industry partners creating and incentivizing workforce development? And so we prioritize hiring local, bringing in local trades, local contractors to supplement these jobs. So I think as a community, you need to understand, do you have the resources currently available to support this type of industry? And if not, how do you create a strategic action plan to be prepared for an industry to move in, to be prepared for additional housing, additional workforce, additional traffic inside of your gas stations, your restaurants, and things of that nature? And so really it comes and does kind of a full circle to what I said at the very beginning. It all starts with having conversations, sitting at the same table, and making sure that the industry partners can talk to the community stakeholders and help them understand what to expect so that everybody's well prepared for what the industry will bring.
All right, well, thank you so much to the panelists. I think this was a great start to the day to really explain the infrastructure needs and what AI is, and really appreciate you being here. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much to our panelists. You could see on the stage a definite partnership that's there, and I think that word gets overused a lot sometimes, but for us, partnership is critical for our success as we go forward now and into the future. So I'm going to take just a minute to recognize our great partners that are making this event a reality for us today. So first and foremost, Dakota Carrier Network. They've been our partner as our premier sponsor since the very beginning of the Tech Summit. And so we are so fortunate for the DCN team, for the tremendous support, for the great work that you do throughout the community. Thank you for that. Our gold sponsors, Fidium Business, Microsoft, and Network Center. Our silver sponsors are Advanced Business Methods, Applied Digital, Bell Bank, Cass County Electric Cooperative, Minnesota State University Moorhead, Dakota State University, and OnSharp. And then across the room, you see the room filled with many corporate sponsors that purchase tables and allow the opportunity for their employees to hear this great content as well. So once again, to all of those sponsors, we tremendously thank you for your support. In addition to that, we have 2 media sponsors. Our event is streamed throughout the Midwest, really throughout wherever I guess anyone wants to stream it, through our partnership with Inforum and KFGO. Finally, we couldn't do events like this without great people. So Red River Valley Fairgrounds really is a tremendous partner. We do a lot of our events here because they are so easy to work with, and the space is really conducive to this. Livewire, our great team that puts on all of our AV equipment. We do hear this a lot. Speakers that speak all over the globe, talking about how well and how well run and how professional the event is. And finally, 5'20" Design Lounge is our photography sponsor, who helps capture all of that. But I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that some of the best partnerships come from our chambers that stream this, promote this, have others joining. For those in the audience, we generally have between 6,000 and 7,000 people online that are watching and engaging with us, and that's because we have 32 chambers all across the Midwest that partner with us. So once again, we couldn't do this without all of those partnerships, all the sponsors, all the support, all of you as attendees. So thank you very much. Let's give them all a round of applause. Now we get to hear just a minute and learn a little bit more about our premier sponsor, Dakota Carrier Network. Please help me welcome Troy Walker.
Across the country, industries are doing amazing things to care for the people that they serve. From right here in North Dakota, DCN and our 13 owner companies are empowering some of the largest, most critical institutions with high-speed, reliable connectivity and innovative data solutions. DCN helps keep you connected and your data protected so you can focus on what really matters. DCN, your premier partner for secure, reliable, high-speed technology solutions.
Give me just a minute here. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber for bringing the summit to life and recognizing that technology is a business issue that affects all businesses, regardless of their size and infrastructure. Let's give Shannon and the Chamber a round of applause. On behalf of DCN, I'd like to welcome you to the Midwest Technology Summit. We're proud to be the presenting sponsor, and I'm glad to be here with all of you today. And since our CEO, Seth Orndorfer, was part of the previous discussion, I have the honor of sharing a few words on behalf of DCM. We sponsor this event because technology has become an integral part of doing business. It's part of every decision we make, how we serve our customers, manage our operations, protect information, recruit and retain employees, and how we grow. Today's topics are not abstract ones. They're issues that we're dealing with every day, affecting our budgets, staffing, security, solutions, and customer expectations, and your long-term competitiveness. At DCN, we serve businesses, governments, and other organizations with secure, reliable, high-speed technology solutions across North Dakota and beyond. Our foundation comes from our owner companies, which are the 13 independent rural broadband providers across the state. Those companies serve residential customers as well as their local businesses. Together, DCN and the owners' customers serve nearly over 400 communities, like Seth stated earlier, and we have more than 70,000 miles of fiber optic cable in service. North Dakota is one of the best connected states in the country, and that has been through intentional, diligent design. But progress does not mean our work is done. Demands for the network are growing quickly. That's why DCN has partnered with Range and Wind Technologies for the Heartland Fiber Project. Together, we're expanding the infrastructure across the upper Midwest with a $700 million, 2,000-mile expansion that will increase capacity, resiliency, and flexibility to grow connectivity needs. That means more fiber in the ground for your business to access, and it means stronger digital infrastructure to support business growth, resiliency, and future success. So as we spend time today talking about AI, workforce, and emergent technology, remember that innovation needs infrastructure, business growth needs connectivity, and strong regions are built when we work together. Next, we'll delve into policy, people, and progress. Artificial intelligence is rapidly shaping the way we work, communicate, and innovate. But the conversation around AI is no longer just about technology itself. It's also about the policies that guide it, the people who use it, the decisions organizations and communities must make to ensure it's both responsible and sustainable. The next conversation, Navigating AI Landscape, will explore how we evolve governance, regulatory discussions may impact AI adoption, risk management, and innovation in the years ahead. Leading today's conversation is Patrick Hedger, Director of Policy at NetChoice. He is an expert of antitrust policy, content moderation, free speech, data privacy, and economic policy. Joining him is Terry Efforts, Executive Director of TechND, a champion of innovation and an advocate for responsible use of technology across North Dakota. Please join me in welcoming Patrick and Terry to the stage.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, one person up here. That was kind of you. I appreciate that. Note it's from the premier sponsors table, too. So, good morning, Patrick.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Happy to be here in North Dakota.
Well, I'm Terry, obviously, and this is Patrick. He's my new friend. He's not from here, so let's be nice to him, okay, everybody? We're going to talk about how AI really is no longer just about technology, but about how organizations and communities and industries adapt to its growing impact. It's something that we've seen in any business of any size in North Dakota, and it's an important topic to delve into. First, let's do a little bit of introductions, though. Terry Efforts, TechND. I've been running the organization since 2023. TechND's been around since 1999. We started with just some tech companies, and now, really, anybody is using technology. I don't think we have any Amish furniture makers, but that's right. Really about it. So, Patrick, what about you? Give us a little bit of background. Maybe tell us what your favorite dinosaur was as a kid.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, it got to be the Velociraptor. But otherwise, my name is Patrick Hedger. I'm Director of Policy at NetChoice. NetChoice is a trade association, but we are a principles-based trade association. So all of our work is grounded in advancing the principles of free enterprise and free expression. And we advance those particular principles because we believe those are the things that made America's technology sector the world's leading technology sector. Those are the two things that we have that are unique to the rest of the world. And the results have really paid dividends. What I like to share with folks is that at the turn of the century, the European Union's economy was a peer economy to ours. It was actually slightly larger than that of the United States. But the Europeans took a different approach to technology policy. They took a precautionary principle-based approach to technology versus the United States embraced what we like to call permissionless innovation. And in the 26 years since, the U.S. economy has now doubled up that of the European Union. Our economy is now twice the size of the European Union's economy, and that's made a real difference in the quality of life and the services that are available for Americans. And as we enter and transition really from the internet age into the AI age, I think it would be a really huge shame and would have demonstrable negative impacts on the average lives of every American if we didn't take that same path when it comes to AI.
So I'm just going to ask the easiest question right off the bat. Can you give us a definition of AI?
That's a really, really good and difficult question because depending on the definition of AI, you could sweep up technologies that we've had for a very long time, whether that's, potentially even spell check itself could be considered a version of AI depending on how you want to define it. There's, I think, a proper definition of AI that really brings the conversation a little bit back down to earth is it's advanced computing. This is advanced pattern recognition. It's great. It is new and exciting. It has a lot of interesting capabilities that will revolutionize every sector. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that the existing principles that have worked for preceding technological revolutions won't work for AI.
Have any governments out there put in their own definitions of AI yet? And have you seen a patchwork start to create?
Yeah, the patchwork is becoming a bit of a problem. And we've seen definitions of AI that were so broad. I remember that there was a Senate bill actually at the federal level, I believe that was coming from the Democratic side that had a definition of AI that was so broad it would have swept up digital cameras. And so digital cameras would have been regulated incidentally by this bill. So you have to be very careful when we're approaching any sort of regulation to be careful what, not the intended consequences, but what are the potential unintended consequences or the potential outcomes. Intent is great, but really outcomes are what we need to be focused on.
And for you younger people in the audience, digital cameras used to exist before we had cell phones
Right.
in our pockets. So give me a little bit of background. You've seen all sorts of legislation across the country. I think everybody here needs to be livened up by hearing about the most absurd AI legislation that you've seen.
Yeah, thankfully it didn't pass. It was changed before Connecticut went and actually passed their AI bill. But the definition or what this bill would have potentially done, there was a section of it that was related to what a chatbot could do when it was interacting with a young user. And again, very well intended, but the way the bill was written, it said that a chatbot could not prioritize the individual feelings or beliefs or other individual characteristics of that young user over truth. Now, at first brush, that sounds good, right? You don't want chatbots lying to you. But then you start thinking about the kinds of questions that any of us, or particularly a young user, would potentially ask an AI system. I don't see a whole lot of young people in this room, so hopefully I'm not spoiling anything. Is Santa Claus real? Do you want the AI chatbot prioritizing truth over the sensitivities of that young user? And then you also have the blatant First Amendment problem of the state of Connecticut deciding what is and what is not true. Policing fact, policing speech. All of these things fly headlong into the First Amendment.
Poor Santa Claus. One thing I'd like to delve into is, on that basis, do LLMs and chatbots have the same definition of truth that humans would have? And how do they come to those realizations?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it ultimately gets to some of the big problems that we see with the type of regulation that's either being pursued, regulation and legislation at either the state or federal level and overseas as well, is this idea of policing subjective topics. There's a lot of, again, well-intended pieces of legislation out there that are, but they have very subjective definitions of what is and what is not potentially harmful, instead of going after the things that we know are objectively harmful. You can police fraud. If you're using AI to commit fraud, that's still illegal. That's already illegal. You don't need to sort of kind of parse out and have politicians deciding what is and what is not fact, policing what is and what is not appropriate or harmful speech. Those are decisions that are best left to families.
So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork here and we all have a perfect understanding of AI, I'm going to remind you guys that you've got QR codes up here, and Patrick and I really want your questions. They're also on the tables in front of you, so I'm going to assume everybody with their phone out is typing a question for us. So let's talk about kind of that patchwork that we mentioned earlier. States are moving at wildly different speeds. Of course, in North Dakota, we only meet biennially. Other states around us meet annually. Is the 50-state laboratory working as it should be, or is this just a compliance nightmare waiting to happen?
You know, the other side of the coin of the Federalist system is that Congress and the framers of the Constitution very clearly laid out that there are some areas where it is best that the federal government be the ultimate regulator, and that is anything that is fundamentally an interstate service, interstate commerce, the Commerce Clause. And I don't think there's anything more interstate than the internet, the World Wide Web. If you're texting somebody even within this room, there's a good chance that that message flows through a data center that's in another state, perhaps. And so you're fundamentally interacting with interstate systems, and the best level of regulation for anything like that is the federal level, because there are certain things where, I'm as much of a federalist as the next guy, but there are certain categories of industry that you have a problem with very large states that love to regulate, that ultimately become the de facto regulator for the rest of the country. If you go into Home Depot and pick up a pack of light bulbs, you can flip that pack of light bulbs over and see all of the California regulatory standards on it, even if you're buying it here in Fargo, North Dakota. So we don't want to run into that same problem with AI, and I'm afraid we're heading that direction where you have a couple of very large population states that are particularly aggressive when it comes to regulating any industry, that are now beginning to really set the rules of the road for the rest of the country. And it's not really going to matter in a large part what states with a smaller population are putting in place.
And to that point, I think it's not only those larger populations that are regulating, but that's where we see the litigation come up as well.
Yeah.
So thanks, attorneys. Kidding, Tammy and I are both attorneys, so that wasn't a dig at her. What's the single biggest mistake you see in the states when they're trying to regulate AI at either a broad or a granular level?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a theme to my remarks here, it would be that while AI is new and exciting and has a lot of potentially great opportunities in unlocking things that we would have never been able to imagine before, I think it's critical to understand that, again, the principles that made us the leader in the world technology and innovation can still apply to AI, and not think of AI as some sort of unique category of technology. You know, the principles by which we regulate a hammer, for example, should also apply to AI. And what I mean by that is the single biggest mistake that I see any regulator trying to make when it comes to AI is say, if you applied it to a hammer, would be to say, I need you to design me a hammer that can still do its job of nailing a nail, but cannot possibly be used as a weapon. That doesn't make any sense. You essentially defeat the purpose of the technology itself by limiting its capabilities to such a degree, or you've put in place rules and regulations that create such a high bar that nobody ever enters the marketplace to begin with. And so instead of saying, design me a hammer that cannot be used to smack somebody over the head, what we say is, it is illegal to smack somebody over the head with a hammer. And you can apply that same type of regulation to AI as well. There are specific known harms, fraud being one of them, that we already have laws on the books that can and do apply to AI. And so thinking about those narrow categories of how do we combat known abuse, instead of trying to predict the future in all of the potential categories of innovation that AI will impact. None of us have a crystal ball. I don't think anybody could have anticipated back in the 90s what the internet has become today. But the rules that we put in place when it came to the internet was a permissionless innovation structure. And we said, we're going to take a light touch approach. We know there are a couple things that we want to address here, but for the most part, we're going to try and let 1,000 flowers bloom, and we're going to let competition ultimately be the best regulator. And so those principles will set us up for success with AI, and I hope we can continue to embrace them.
I agree that we need to think about it as a tool, not as some standalone piece of technology. In the same way that we adopted typewriters and vehicles and really any other major innovation that's come about. We know how some states get it wrong. Are there any areas where they're doing well? Is there any topic where most states are getting something right?
Yeah, that's a tough question because ultimately, you know, from our perspective, if the states are getting involved here and trying to regulate AI in lots of different ways with different subjective definitions of what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to police, that creates that patchwork nightmare. And so to the extent that any state is pursuing something that, again, goes after what we know to be known harms, polices those uses and abuses versus trying to insert bureaucrats into the innovation process itself, that would be a better way for states if states choose to approach this. But you know, again, all of the existing rules and regulations at the federal level, FTC Act, policing fraud, already apply to AI, and the FTC under both the Biden and Trump administrations has made that clear. So would encourage state regulators, local regulators to look to what you already have on the books, and instead of trying to create a new regulatory dynamic around this technology, think about adding capacity in terms of expertise in the law enforcement sector and in the regulatory sector about how you can apply existing protections to AI technology. And we've seen that in a couple states. I think Utah is probably a good example of a state that's done that and tried to increase its government capacity in terms of understanding AI and then adopting AI. And the only way that you're going to be able to really get your head around it is to be able to use it.
So in that same example, I think one area that we've seen and had discussions is specifically about the creation of CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. And previously, you know, there was an argument that, well, it's not actually children being harmed. And so I think, is that one area that falls in line with just saying, okay, if this tool can be used to create something, even though it didn't fall into that original definition, it's still causing that same harm?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when we know there's a narrow category that is explicit known harm, and you can target that. Instead of, again, trying to predict all of the potential harms that are out there, we know that is one, and that way you can target that. And there's actually great model policy through the American Legislative Exchange Council, if anybody is interested in that, that does just that. So it protects people, it protects families without potentially stifling the critical innovation process through targeted regulation.
And so where's that line between protecting people from real harms and just protecting incumbents from their competition?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the more complicated regulatory structures that you create, you inherently, I said earlier, the best regulator is ultimately these companies competing with each other to produce the best systems that serve the most people the best. And so if you are creating complicated regulatory structures that are going to require companies to hire lots of lawyers and lots of engineers specifically to try and parse out what they think you meant through that regulation, you're going to have a lot of startups, the kinds of companies that start in somebody's garage or somebody's basement say, I've got a pool of money here. I can either hire an engineer or a lawyer. Well, we don't have a system yet. I need to hire an engineer, and I can't hire the lawyer. So creating those clear rules of the road that don't require an internal bureaucracy is really the best way to go.
I think what Patrick is saying is encourage your children to be both an engineer and an attorney for maximum benefit. You're kind of our expert here on the 50-state level. And so let's revisit a topic from the last session that we had about data centers. North Dakota's trying to attract data centers. We're also figuring out how to regulate the AI inside of them sometimes. There's discussions of moratoriums. What's happening at the national level?
Yeah, I never thought 6 months ago that I would be talking so much about big buildings full of computers. But here we are. And while there are certainly folks with legitimate concerns, everybody should be concerned that, and hope that their drinking water's clean, their power bill is not going to go up too much. The good news is that data centers are not contributing to those problems. The information that we have, again, you heard earlier, we've been building data centers in the United States for the better part of the last 3 decades. What we're combating right now is an environment with a lot of well-intended concerns, but being fed by a tremendous amount of misinformation about what a data center does. And then there's a lot of, this conversation has become a lot about talking about AI and data centers all at once without recognizing that data centers do a lot more than just AI. Thank you to everybody that's watching right now online. You're using data centers right now. So that is, we're seeing communities that are embracing data centers and are reaping the benefits in terms of essentially a flood of property tax revenue that's coming in and is allowing communities to redevelop themselves and create new opportunities. But unfortunately, we're seeing places that are signaling that they're closed for business. And that's going to have a nasty ripple effect beyond even the data center industry.
In the Midwest, we always have a lot of pride when it comes to our local control. And so a lot of our siting happens at the county level, the city level. Is that similar across the country, or are there states that have taken a heavier hand in the siting and permitting of all data centers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly New York, we've got Governor Hochul that signed and just said we're not going to have any data centers over 50 megawatts, and that's a pretty low threshold at this point that's going to sweep up data centers that have nothing to do with AI and that power the everyday devices and use cases that we have, and has signaled that New York is essentially closed for business. But mostly what we're seeing is regulation at the local level. But what I encourage folks to recognize is that there's no data center exemption to the vast majority of existing rules and regulations, whether at the state, local, or federal level. Data centers have to comply with existing nuisance ordinances. They have to comply with zoning regulations, setbacks for noise. They have to comply with existing EPA standards and water use standards. All of these things are already regulated. And much like the discussion about AI itself, let's not take an approach where we're going to say we can't apply existing rules and regulations that every other industry has to deal with to data centers. And we're going to create this special category that creates hurdles that are essentially insurmountable for any investment to be made.
Excellent. Let's switch a little bit to the talent and workforce area as well. So if you were advising a state like ours on AI and workforce policy, what would you tell people to stop doing when they're using AI in their workplace?
Well, I would say stop maybe treating it as this thing that's, again, that is only has a couple of use cases or needs specialized training. What I would encourage anybody that's looking to the future in terms of the AI and workforce is to understand that all technology and software in the future will be AI enabled and AI integrated. The White House's AI advisor and czar, David Sachs, has said all software will be AI going forward. And I think that's something that folks need to take to heart. So you wouldn't hire somebody these days that doesn't know how to use email. And I think that making sure that your workforce is AI literate and understands, the capabilities of the technology is really going to be critical, and that applies to the people that are doing the hiring and the people that are doing the educating as well. I've seen university systems and K-12 systems say, well, we're going to eliminate AI from the classroom altogether. I think that's setting people up for failure, because you go into any industry, they're looking for efficiencies, they're looking to do as much as possible with the resources that they have, and AI is the ultimate tool for that. And so if you're limiting the ability of people to familiarize themselves with that technology and hone their skills, you're setting yourself and them up for failure.
Yeah, I know. One thing I did as a small business owner is I actually encourage my employees to take some sort of course. Find the course, send it to me, take an hour a day, I'll pay you for it, because the more you know about this, the stronger and better our small company will be. Mm-hmm. There is some fear, of course, because we've got intellectual property and copyright ownership. Can AI be used effectively if there's a lot of trade secrets in a company?
Oh, absolutely. This is another thing that we need to think of when we come to AI or data centers. This technology is not monolithic. You have different types of AI systems out there. You have open source systems, and you have closed systems. You have systems that operate inside of a data center, and then you have systems that you can operate from a powerful computer that's just located and siloed within your enterprise. So again, thinking of AI as just this monolithic thing, just these chatbots that most of us are interacting with, is really missing the full spectrum of what it is. And so that shouldn't make you afraid, this idea that if you are using, a certain type of AI system, what you've heard about that shouldn't make you afraid of adopting AI capabilities, because you can tailor the technology for your needs.
So what's your preferred LLM when you need to write an email?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Right now I use a lot of Gemini. I think Gemini is great, but I love to play them all off of one another. And I think that is, so you seeing what ChatGPT would say to the same prompt that you give to Gemini, and then going to some of the other chatbots. I think that's probably the most effective way right now that I use it. You'll find that some LLMs are really good general purpose. Others are better for writing text. Others are better for generating images. So I would just encourage folks to kind of play around with them. And what's really fun about AI is actually utilizing it at home. I like to garden, and I love to walk around my yard and just say, hey, what's this plant? What kind of care does it need? Actually, I used AI just the other day. I noticed, I think my neighbor has an infestation of carpenter ants, and I was only able to figure that out because I said, oh gosh, what's this type of ant, what's this type of frass that we're seeing? And it nailed it right away, and it was confirmed by the exterminator that came out. So play around with it. Take a picture of your pantry. What meal could I make with the ingredients that you see here? You'll find that sort of enables the creative juices in your mind to think about how you would apply it in your business life as well.
Yeah, and I think that being able to build an effective prompt is so different than what we've typically done when we're just searching the internet, especially for those of us who remember telephones attached to a wall with a cord. And so even just taking a 1-hour class about learning how to change your mindset when you look for information can be really valuable. And I've absolutely done, the AI Chopped before, where I tell it what I have and it'll build a beautiful recipe for me.
That's right.
How should organizations be thinking about AI adoption and talent strategy together rather than separate conversations? Is there more, should they be thinking about it on the onset? Should they be upskilling people? What's the current level out there?
Yeah, sort of to my previous point, it should be a factor in all sort of workforce development as well as employment decisions. Even if you're not utilizing a lot of AI right now, you will be going forward, or your competitors will be. And so making sure that, unfortunately, I don't think we're at the point right now where the education system is producing high levels of AI literacy. I think we need to get there. So I think it is incumbent upon enterprises to say, hey, we're going to bring people in and make sure that they are literate in how to utilize AI. And that's going to create a lot of societal benefits as well. If people are interacting with an AI in a positive way in a business use case, they're going to be better protected from potential misuses of AI that you're going to encounter out there.
Is there one highly regulated or heavy competition industry like banking, insurance, pharmacy? Is there one that's doing it better than the other, or is it pretty even?
That's a great question. I would say it's fairly even for right now. But one story I like to point to, and use case that I like to point to, that really demonstrates the positive potential across all of the areas that we may be concerned about AI, would be a specific category of medicine, which is radiology, right? The people that read your MRIs, your X-rays, things like that, the doctor that assesses what potential condition you may have or may hopefully not have from your radiology reports. And there was somebody said back in the, I think it was like 2015, 2016, that now is the time, stop hiring radiologists. AI is just going to do all of this. Demand for radiologists has never been higher. There are more radiologists today than ever before. And yet that is an industry, that is a sector where we have seen potentially, to your question, probably the highest level of AI penetration. And what we're seeing is that what AI has allowed for is the reduction in the marginal cost of seeing an additional patient and an improved set of outcomes for that patient. The AI can see things that a radiologist probably couldn't see, and then the radiologist is able to confirm that. And so instead of replacing the radiologist, it has made the radiologist 10 times more effective. And that has lowered the cost of those services and thereby increased demand for those services. And I think we're going to see the same thing in a lot of these professional sectors where cost may be a barrier for a large portion of the population, whether that's accounting services, legal services, or other medical fields. AI is going to reduce the barrier for access because it is accentuating the abilities of the people providing those services. And so your demand is going to continue to increase.
And I think we've already seen improved healthcare outcomes as well, because the average time to catch breast cancer, I mean, the AI just does it a little bit better than the human eye based on how the technology of X-rays works. And so especially in the medical field, we'll probably see some more lives that are saved because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a hospital, I think it was in my hometown in the Tampa Bay area of Florida. They used a system that Palantir had developed, and they were able to, I think, cut sepsis deaths in half. I mean, we're saving lives today with this technology. So we've got to be very careful in terms of what types of rules and regulations we put in place that limit our ability to save lives in settings like that.
Yeah. So then how much of the workforce anxiety around AI is really about the AI technology, and how much of it is about something else entirely, just automation fears?
Yeah, I think Hollywood deserves a decent amount of blame for people's perceptions of what AI will and will not be. But I like to say, again, let's not think of this, again, as much as I want to emphasize to folks that this is a new and exciting technological field, the principles that applied to previous technological revolutions, there's no reasons they won't apply to AI. There's the famous Jevons paradox, and that relates to the power of steam engines back during the Industrial Revolution. And everybody thought, well, my gosh, by making steam engines more efficient, we're going to reduce demand related to that sector, and that's not what happened. Job growth grew because the costs and efficiencies of those things increased. And we're going to see that in AI as well, and the technologies that AI is integrated into. There are more people alive today on this planet doing more jobs and more types of jobs with more technology than ever before. So yes, the purpose of technology at some level does displace labor. I mean, the wheel displaced people that were carrying things on their backs, but that doesn't mean that there won't be new types of jobs created. So we definitely need to have policies in place that ensure people can make that transition. I don't want to say that, some people, that nobody will be impacted by an economic transition. That will happen. But we can have policies in place that make sure that transition is as smooth and as fast as possible. And we continue to see the kind of economic growth that we saw, and potentially even more economic growth that we saw with the internet age. I mean, there are lots of people these days making lots of money as IT infrastructure experts that you wouldn't have been able to predict in the 1950s, or lots of people making money as independent podcasters. Who would have thought? You would have thought that the ubiquity of the media created by the internet would have made it impossible for anybody to compete and earn a living as a broadcaster, but that is simply not proven to be the case. You've got podcasters out there. Some of these people are making millions and millions of dollars. So it's about making sure you don't try to predict the future too much, and then also look to what technology has done for us in the past. And again, recognize that technology has the ability to liberate resources, including labor, to go and do other things, do better things.
Like influencers.
I won't speak to that.
So when we look at the current workforce versus who we are actually creating today, I think that's one of the reasons it's so important for employers right now to put some interest and effort into upskilling. And maybe it's not even upskilling, but it's giving a different set of skills. And we need to see that in short-term educational programs. And we also need to have higher education respond to that as well, which is notoriously a slow-moving organization, just like any government organization. Is there a way to do that appropriately?
Yeah, again, I think just we want to see a lot of experimentation here. We're at the early stages of this. I know there are some folks from academia in the room, so I would encourage you to experiment with the ways that AI is integrated into the classroom, into the curriculum. But this, don't go down the path that I've seen some, campuses go and say, you're not going to utilize it at all. Again, I think that's setting people up for failure, and that's going to signal that this is not an educational institution that's going to be worth my tuition dollars, because it's not going to be preparing me for the career fields that are available.
So if you had to bet, and we will hold him to this, if you had to bet, is AI regulation in the country going to be driven more by Congress, the states, or the courts 5 years from now?
Oh, that's a great question. As much as I want it to be driven by Congress, something we've also been asking for Congress is data privacy and data security regulation, a national standard on that, and that's been something that's preceded sort of this AI age. And that hasn't happened. Maybe we'll see it with AI. There are some good bills at the federal level, the folks that are making an earnest effort to try and put in place a federal standard. But right now we have already seen California, we've seen Illinois, we've seen New York, all sort of rushing to one-up one another in terms of the AI regulation that they're putting in place. And to the extent that those regulations, again, try to insert bureaucrats into the innovation process and insert the subjective beliefs of that particular, whatever particular political influence controls that state into the development of AI systems, you're going to have a problem where a lot of that state legislation does end up running into First Amendment issues. It does begin to run into Commerce Clause issues, potentially Takings Clause issues. You brought up the point of intellectual property earlier. The courts are already well equipped and dealing with the potential conflicts that occur when it comes to intellectual property and AI systems. So if I'm a betting person, it's probably going to be the courts checking essentially a lot of what the states are trying to do, and then we'll see more of a norms framework emerge from that.
Almost some sort of checks and balances.
Yeah, can you believe it?
Speaking of legislation, we've got about a minute left here. Have you ever seen a state bill that started off that went from a good idea to an absolute mess once it hit committee or hit the human brain?
You know, I don't want to downplay the committee process. I think it's important to have that process. So I would say it is better to take more time and consider any type of rule or regulation that you're putting in place when it comes to a frontier technology like this. What we've actually seen is pretty much the opposite. You get a lot of potentially knee-jerk reactions to scary stories or hypotheses that are out there about AI, where it's important to then have that process to think through, get stakeholder input, and potentially make a framework more livable that won't necessarily stifle innovation. We've seen that in a couple states, actually, where we've had some pretty extremely prescriptive AI rules and regulations that would have set effectively impossible standards, put in place political biases of the sponsors of that legislation into the development of the system itself. Even in somewhere like Texas, where we saw a bill like that introduced. And because we have rigorous debate and processes for deciding rules and regulations, they were able to move that regulation into a more responsible and workable framework. We saw that in Colorado. Colorado was a state where they passed a very aggressive AI regulation, and to the credit of the Democratic governor and attorney general there, they said that this is not workable, this is not enforceable, and it's going to kill innovation in Colorado. You have to revisit this, and thankfully the subsequent legislature did revisit it, and they're in a process now of figuring out the exact parameters of AI regulation in Colorado. So yeah. I think that letting cooler heads prevail here. We're at the dawn of this technology. You know, like this right now, trying to put in place a comprehensive set of AI rules and regulations right now would be like trying to apply all of the regulations of an automobile to a Model T. The technology's just not there yet.
That's a great analogy. Again, everybody, Patrick Hedger, Terry Efforts. You can find NetChoice and TechND online. Thank you, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Midwest Technology Summit will now take a brief 10-minute intermission. Ladies and gentlemen, the Midwest Technology Summit will resume in 1 minute. Once again, our show will resume in 1 minute. Please take your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Shannon Fole.
All right, this is the challenge. All right. Oh, it's working pretty good. We said we've got AI figured out that they can do lots of things with data, but getting people back to sitting down in a seat, they haven't figured that out yet. So here we go. So far this morning, we've explored the infrastructure making AI possible, from energy to connectivity to data systems, as well as policy leadership and public trust questions shaping the adoption. Our next conversation shifts the focus to the people side of this and how we prepare them for the future that is quickly changing. AI is already changing how we work, the skills employers need, and how we need to think about education and workforce development. So how do we prepare people, not just for the jobs of today, but the opportunities that are still taking shape? And how do we make sure our region has the talent it needs to compete, grow, and succeed in what comes next? Leading that conversation is someone who works at the intersection of these issues each and every day. As our Vice President of Workforce, Jane Vignish-Frisch works closely with employers, K-12, and higher education, as well as our workforce partners across the region to strengthen talent and workforce development and help the needs of both businesses and workers. So please join me in welcoming Jane and our panelists for the next panel, Shaping the Future Workforce, Education, AI, and Regional Competitiveness.
Well, good morning. I feel very, very fortunate to have all of you here with us, joining us this morning, but also to have this great panel to start to talk about the people side of AI. And I know not only did Terry and Patrick do a really great job of kind of giving us a lead-in of a lot of the workforce and people side of AI, this is really what we focus on, as Shannon mentioned, with the workforce team at the Chamber. Focusing on how can we connect people to not only education, but also business and industry and what is needed. And we know that AI, technology, is an important aspect of that. So I feel really, really fortunate to have this great group of panelists here with me today. Again, thank you for joining us. And so I think we'll get started. Titles don't really do justice to what you do day in, day out. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you could kind of introduce yourself, and I think we're going to start off with kind of a rapid fire question. So maybe starting, Ben, if you can talk about what you do, but then also finish this phrase: AI should be viewed as. So if you want to, I mean, Ben, I told you I was going to be hard on you, so you get to start this.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share the stage with an amazing group of folks. My name is Ben Doyle, and I have the opportunity of overseeing a great group of folks at American Crystal Sugar who is in charge or to lead the change or the challenge of finding a great workforce and developing that workforce and finding the opportunities to grow and adapt to new technology. And back to the question.
AI should be viewed as?
AI should be viewed as a tool, a technology, an advancement that we can use to further ourselves, to grow and to expand as a region and as a community.
So Ben, how many employees are at American Crystal Sugar? I think that helps people kind of level set.
Over 7 facilities, we have about 1,700 employees.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Heidi.
All right, good morning. My name is Heidi Grunwald. I'm serving as the Interim Vice President for Research at NDSU. Go Bison. And thanks for that. And in my day today, I oversee the breadth of research, the regulatory frameworks, the stuff that keeps us out of jail and out of the newspaper, but also the wonderful research that's going on in the faculty labs. I would say AI should be viewed as a generational moment and an opportunity.
Thank you. Josh.
Josh Reedy. I am the Executive Director for MSUM's Institute of Applied AI, an undertaking that the leadership at that table embarked upon over a year ago, and wanting to adopt AI at scale across all of MSUM and taking a leadership role within Minnesota State. My phrasing for AI is what you make of it.
Yeah.
And if you choose to be invested in it, you will get a return. If you choose to ignore it, you will see what others who've invested in it can do.
And go Dragons, right?
And go Dragons, for sure.
Rob Leck, I am the Assistant Superintendent for West Fargo Public Schools, which means from a secondary standpoint, I am responsible for grades 6 through 12. And I would say that AI, I have really a lot of great answers already about what AI is. I think it's a support. It's really all of the things that have been shared already. It's a great tool, but it's a support that should exist for all of us, whether it's in school or post-secondary, to enhance our work.
Thank you.
And go Hawks, go Mustangs, and go Packers.
There you go. We're going to get all of the mascots named up here today. You know, we talk a lot about this at the Chamber, and I hear this from our business and industry partners more and more, is AI is changing what entry-level employees really look like. We hear that through our industry sector partnerships, the conversations that my team is having day in, day out. Ben, and then maybe I'll go to you too, Josh. Talk a little bit about how AI and technology in general is shifting expectations for entry-level talent and even some career pathways at American Crystal.
Yeah, Jane, it has shifted, and we've taken a lot of the repetitive tasks, and it's shifted this skill base that's required of employees. And we don't see a lot of it directly right now due to the fact that a lot of our employees are industrial or skill trades-based employees, but you're seeing the trickle-down effect. And it's very similar to implementations of other technologies that we've seen within the factories and automation, where upskilling employees has been required to keep up with advancements and movement within the factories. Our East Grand Forks factory is celebrating 100 years this year, and it looks very different today than it did when it opened in 1926. And so we've had to adapt what that looks like. We currently, when I started just 5 years ago, we had one specialized training program that was a pay-for-skills program to promote from within as we upskill those employees, and we're currently at 5. So growth and growing from within and creating those opportunities internally where we upskill and create those paths for employees is key.
Yeah, and that upskilling, the reinvestment and retention then of those employees are so important. And I know, Josh, at Minnesota State, you all are really focused on how can you provide just-in-time education, training, education. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing over there and how you're helping with that entry-level talent and AI literacy, I guess we could say?
Yeah, absolutely. Literacy is the name of the game when it comes to AI. If you think about consumerism around the largesse of facilities like Applied Digital, which is in Harwood, backstage joke. When you think about monetizing that, integration becomes key. And you realize that there is a stratification between the very large companies, corporate, and the very small companies, small businesses, nonprofits. And entry-level talent feels like the vanguard of AI into the smaller organizations. The very largest can afford positions that are called forward deployment engineers, which is one of the hottest professions to be in right now. You can look at Microsoft and the substantial investment into consulting services, but yet only certain companies, certain presences can afford that. Everyone else is relying quite heavily, I would say, on the expectation that graduates not only have the content from their discipline, but they have the skills that they can apply in a readily available fashion to the organizations they're entering. And so I think that, some will say that entry-level experience is eroding, and I think they would be true, but I think it's being replaced by higher expectations than ever before. And that's where at MSUM, we're taking an approach to AI literacy, beginning with humans and how humans relate to AI, with the aspiration of having a fingerprint, a signature, if you will, for every academic program that has a tremendous amount of influence from the external world, the workforce that graduates will be entering. We can't think of a better way to prepare our graduates to be successful in this age of AI.
Thank you for that. So the ultimate entry level, Rob, kindergarten. Yeah. Talk to us about what that looks like for your students and how you're engaging with that.
Well, it's such a great question. AI literacy is really at the heart of what we should be talking about, what we certainly are talking about at the K-12 level, and it does extend all the way down into the kindergarten, a framework of understanding around what AI literacy is. And now I'm not suggesting that we should be teaching prompt generations or how to write an appropriate query to kindergarten students. That's not an appropriate skill set, but we should be talking about things as simple as what's a machine? What does a machine do? What is true? What is false? And that, expands up into, more exploratory opportunities that would happen at a middle level. And then at the high school, we're starting to talk about more application and ethical, appropriate application. What we get concerned about, or what, if you talk to teachers, what they may be concerned about at the K-12 level is what we would call cognitive offload, replacing learning and critical thinking and task with an AI tool. Instead of using it as that tool that we talked about before, it's about how do we use and how do we teach that, utilize that framework to teach our students how to appropriately use. So when they leave us and go into whatever pathway they choose, whether that's going to a university, whether that's going to a trade school, whether it's going to the military or workforce, that they are appropriately supported in how to use AI in the manner in which the workforce or whatever next step for them is considered appropriate.
Yeah, and I think it's about making sure that we have that perspective of what is appropriate, what level, and what skills really are needed. I don't want to miss this opportunity to remind the audience to please submit your questions, chamberquestions.com. You can scan that QR code at your tables. We have a few coming in, so I'm gonna lob this question out there. How is the education system responding to businesses' demand for AI learning across disciplines? And actually, Heidi, I'm gonna kind of direct this to you. And the reason that I'm gonna do that is because research is really impacted by AI. And how are we being responsive to not only the needs, but also what business and industry is telling us that we need to better understand through research?
So I think the first interface for us is actually having a much closer relationship with our industry sector players. And that is a trend you are going to see. It's being encouraged by every federal opportunity for funding. And that is that we have to show we are reaching out, engaging with, talking to our industry sector, whether it's C-suites, middle management, frontline employees, and figuring out where the opportunities are for the needs. So there's a bit of a framework playing out right now. The National Science Foundation is putting money into something called Tech Access AI Ready America. And we, North Dakota, as a state, submitted a proposal in July. We worked with Terry at TechND, with the Commerce Department and the Governor's AI Task Force, and our partners up at UND. And so there's those 4 core partners, and the whole point there is, NDSU has extension with deep reach into communities and Main Street businesses. The CTB was the lead on that. They're, have a history of connecting businesses with new technologies. So they are going to fund a hub in every state. They're only going to fund 9 out of the gate. We're hoping we're one of the 9, but if we're not, we'll resubmit. And the role here is for that hub to connect the businesses and, even K through 12, K through 20 sector with the resources they need in terms of identifying awareness, readiness, adoption, and then measuring impact. So I think, we're going to see federal dollars here, probably not enough right now. What is $1 million over 3 years? It's not a lot, but it gets the conversation moving.
Yeah, and I know MSUM is really involved on the Minnesota side of the river with that.
I say, what a wonderful area we live in. Very much appreciate what Heidi just mentioned. And the nice thing is across the river, the Minnesota equivalent to that, being led by the University of Minnesota, but also by MSUM and on behalf of Minnesota State. And I think it's very important for us to be able to emphasize that type of collaboration in the upper Midwest. I do think the Dakotas and Minnesota are a great pairing because you get pretty much the entire spectrum of resources and type of business presence. Minneapolis is very different than Fargo-Moorhead, and yet I have to believe, having a lot of history with North Dakota, that Minnesota and North Dakota can find a way to work together and really solve, which is, I think, of a generational challenge in front of us. And I'm going to add something. If you look at the tremendous amount of resources going into AI, 3 companies constitute one IPO, SpaceX, 2 pending, OpenAI and Anthropic. Those 3 combined, and I may get this slightly off, but those 3 combined are larger than the IPOs of the last 30 years combined. I ask myself, if we're making that type of investment, where's the equivalent investment in the people side of this, in the educational side of this? And I would encourage policymakers and lawmakers to really be thinking about how are we going to balance those scales? Because if we don't, I don't think we're going to be able to harness the vast potential that's being built technologically.
And Terry and Patrick referenced that on stage this morning as well. But, I think both, Rob, you addressed this a bit, but one of the questions that has come in is, when we had a lot of the LMs come out, right, and there was a lot of concern about plagiarism and banning them within our schools. Can you talk a little bit about, there's a couple questions about here about how do we reconcile what you were talking about earlier this
Yeah, how do you thread the needle?
Yeah,
right? And that's the responsibility we have at K-12, but I think it's about establishing guardrails at every grade level and even into particular assignments that a teacher might have. I mean, I think of it like a stoplight: red light, yellow light, green light. Red light, what is absolutely not allowed at this grade level, at this age level, at this assignment, in this assignment. Yellow, what's allowed with approval, or what's allowed with certain conditions. And then green, what allowance for AI is used with less level of control, and we're giving a little bit more student autonomy, because we certainly don't want to forget about how students want and need to use the tool itself. And again, so I come back to the cognitive offload. How do we make sure that our students aren't using AI to avoid learning and to just focus on task completion? That becomes a transactional experience, and we want to promote learning. We don't want to promote a transaction, just task completion. And so I think it's about the guardrails first, and making sure that at every level that we are training with every stakeholder group, we're listening to what is needed and we're responding to what is needed. And when I say stakeholders, I'm talking about what do our students need and what are they feeling and needing about the tools. I'm talking about teachers, those that are responsible to facilitate the learning that takes place. I'm talking about the administrators, those that are responsible with ensuring policy is enforced and is supported at a school level and there's consistency, and then also the parents. What are we doing at home and how are we supporting this learning and these new tools and acquisition at home as well? So I think it's a really broad response.
And I think it's also on our business and industry partners. How are we training not only our students, but those that are within our workplaces? And so I'm interested, Ben, from your perspective, and you're really engaged with the chamber, with our industry sector partnerships, and recognizing the importance of upskilling, and you referenced that, but you have a plant that's going to be 100 years old, and you have had employees with you for upwards of 50 years, I have no doubt. So what from a business and industry's perspective, how are you supporting some of those maybe individuals that have been around, seasoned professionals, we'll call them, right, that may be a little bit more resistant, or how are you incorporating that into your onboarding as well of that expectation?
Yeah, Jane, and to your point, yeah, absolutely. There's someone on my team that's been with Crystal for 51 years.
Amazing.
And at a meeting just last week, he demonstrated his use of AI within some of our training content. And so I think the biggest thing when it comes to the aging workforce is awareness. I think fear drives some of our lack of interest. And I think presenting the opportunity for growth and presenting the opportunity for use, and as Patrick mentioned earlier, the AI is everywhere. It's in many of the opportunities, applications of the things we use day in and day out. And I think that awareness piece is huge.
Yeah. So work-based learning. So one of the things that at the Chamber and with our great partners at Golden Pass Solutions and a variety of other collaborations, we recently set goals related to work-based learning within our community. And so talk to us, I know, Ben, you utilize that to a certain extent at American Crystal, and I know, Rob, you're probably really familiar with all those great opportunities, but what role should work-based learning and really preparing the next generation when it comes to not only technology, but just the people side of the new face of the workplace?
Well, I think it's obviously the experience that our students have. In our career tech ed in particular, we have really a decades-long push towards getting our students into the workforce, right? Seeing the relevant application of knowledge beyond them. And I think we're expanding that now into more and more opportunities, but that's really what it's about. It's about making sure that our students see the relevant and appropriate and use of all tools in the workplace. And I know we're talking about AI, but that really supplements the people side. That it supplements the human side. Our workforce isn't just looking for somebody that can prompt generate or that can use an AI tool well. They're looking for good people that have good work skills, that have good soft skills, that can also use these other tools. And so giving our students an opportunity to see that in motion at the industry level, at a workplace, and apply those skills is really how we can take that classroom learning and expand it even greater and make it really a relevant anchor learning for our kids.
Yeah, thank you for that. Heidi, you had talked about this in your introduction. Regulatory, right? That keeping us out of jail, I think, is actually the quote that you used. So talk to us about, especially in the research realm, right? Research and creative activity that you oversee at NDSU and collaborate with a lot of your colleagues. How do you keep yourselves out of jail, for lack of better terms, when it comes to some of that proprietary information and also data sharing, right?
Sure. There's a couple of things in that question. First is the regulatory landscape. And so, from our perspective, when faculty or researchers are submitting proposals that they generate, they are allowed to use AI to generate proposals, scientific proposals that are submitted to agencies for funding, they must acknowledge, and this is part of what you were talking about. We have to say, I used, Claude, I used OpenAI on this date to generate this X, Y, and Z. And so as long as they're acknowledging the use of that in the proposal, it's allowed. Now, on the back side, on the review side, so when a scientific review committee is judging those proposals for scientific merit, they are not allowed to take those proposals and upload them to models and say, is this a good proposal? Is it a strong proposal? Is this cutting edge science? Because it's someone else's intellectual property. So we are seeing some academic integrity issues around, there's a lot of knowledge awareness raising that needs to be done, but every federal agency has put a ban on using AI on the review side. There was another question in there, the regulatory side, and
how are you supporting it? How your researchers seem using it?
yeah, and I'll just say this: NDSU is taking the sort of guidance perspective. We are not out front like Purdue and Ohio State saying we're going to require an AI competency for graduation, but we are giving our faculty a lot of academic freedom, so it is really up to them how they integrate it in the classroom. Fear not, 90%, the Chronicle of Higher Education just did a survey, 90% of our students are already using AI. So it isn't about whether they are using it. And so our guiding principles will be around ethical use, responsible use, understanding, acknowledging.
Yeah. Josh, what about on the Minnesota side? I know that they're taking a systems approach as well to this. So talk to me about how not only your educators within your faculty are being supported with this, but what is the approach that's being taken on the Minnesota side of the river with this?
Great question, and I wish people could have been with us last week. We had a workshop with over 150 K-12 participants, and it was a clear demonstration of both the need, but the opportunity to bring three legs of the stool together. If you think of higher ed in the middle, K-12, there's a desperate need and desire to bring K-12 and higher ed closer together, and that's not new, but I think it's more pronounced with topics like AI out there. Conversely, the connection between higher ed and external partners in the workforce, more important than ever before. And we are so blessed, I'm looking at Taya right now, we are so blessed to have presences like Taya and Microsoft in the community to help us with that, because it's an all hands on deck to be able to pull this together. And I say that because it embodies the approach that we're taking at MSUM in trying to go first and demonstrate what it takes to adopt AI at scale. We don't believe AI should just be in the hands of a few majors, and we don't believe AI literacy is just a boilerplate approach. We really, truly see what the future looks like, and our goal is simple: create the best prepared graduates for the world they're going to enter, and that is regardless of discipline. So with that, we've approached with AI literacy and a framework and the signature for each academic program I spoke of earlier, but also doing the gritty work, the hard work, which is beginning to align your organization to accept AI and to use AI to its greatest potential. And we are committed to transparency, sharing our successes, but also our failures. And we are huge advocates for those regional public institutions that, in my personal opinion, you're starting to see a chasm be created between corporate and R1 and the rest of the world, including the regional public institutions that generate the majority of our graduates.
Thank you for that. So thinking about those graduates, then going over to Ben, what are you seeing as trends? You've been around the human resources industry for a long time. What are you seeing as some of the trends, or what are you finding with seeking out those graduates, and how are you recruiting in maybe a different way or innovative way, and what have you seen throughout the region?
Yeah, and some of this has started long before AI. Some of the regional trends, and you mentioned industry sector partners, partnerships with the K-12 partners, with the post-secondary, establishing those relationships, getting the students into the workplace, recognizing what that work looks like, identifying the paths that they want to take so that they can find the opportunities that are available to them. It's some of it, especially with American Crystal Sugar, it's awareness. It's knowing and understanding what jobs are out there, and I'm sure many of you can appreciate and understand that. And it's placing that awareness in front of the right student so that you can lead that student or provide the opportunity for that student to follow that path and find the career that they want.
Yeah, and education and recruitment doesn't start with when they, the month before they graduate anymore. We used to have, career fairs and everyone would get hired. That happens in 4th grade now. Rob and I were talking about that. So we have a question that came in. What is education in general's response to open model movement for creating new LLMs and customization of those models? Anyone willing to take that? All right, Heidi.
I'll go first, only because we have our experts sitting at the NDSU table. Both experts, CTO Mark Wallman and Dr. Hong. So NDSU just launched its own closed LLM called Horizon. And don't ask me about the specs. If you want to know the specs on it, you can talk to those guys. But that is for our faculty to access. Speaking about anything that you upload into those larger models is, then you're training other models on potential intellectual property. So that's a tremendous opportunity for our faculty and our students to access a closed model like that. And we'll see where that goes. I know a lot of that is the cost of compute. And so we are thinking about ways and how do we scale that? How can we put more users on that? And that's always comes down to the dollar sign.
Yeah. Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
I think what we're going to be seeing and what we already are seeing is that I have the utmost respect for computer scientists and for technologists. I fashion myself as an amateur version of those. And yet, if this intelligence is to become part of the fabric that frames our everyday life, we're going to have the means to educate people to understand what an open model even is. If I had to guess, most people don't know what that is, let alone, it's opening Pandora's box to some degree. And I don't say that in a negative sense. It's you open a world of possibility when you choose to use these tools. And right now, we're using more or less ready-made tools. When you begin to design the tools and weight the tools, you're interjecting your own bias into those, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. And the implications of that bias is something that can be profound and manifest in ways that you might not readily imagine.
Yeah, and I think that bias component is something that we're all concerned about. We actually had a conversation backstage about that. Rob, talk a little bit about equity. And when I say that word, sometimes that's charged, but how do we make sure that we are providing these opportunities for learning and learning in this very data-centric world equitably across all of your schools, all of the grades? Talk about that.
Yeah, we work very hard on that. One thing I want to say, when we were talking the last question, I was reading the question and I was trying to think of, I was trying to dissect that question too. What does that mean? And I think it made me think about our teachers. And I want, maybe a challenge for everybody in the audience. Go thank your teachers in your community. The things and the responsibilities, they have such a complex, tough job. And we get, in the education space, get a lot of these types of new initiatives and new things. We put a lot on our teachers' plates. And this is just one great example of another thing that we put on our teachers' plates to do. But you asked a question about equity. It's about creating a structure and guardrails and expectations at every level, and that's really that's how we provide equity. It doesn't make a difference if you go to Horace, if you go to Osgood, if you go to Heritage, whatever school you go to in West Fargo Public Schools, or any school anywhere. Every student has the same right to the same educational experience and what our outcomes are. And that's really about teaching to standards and about ensuring that every student has the same level of expectation, the same tools. And so really it's about, as a system, establishing what your expectations are. And that kind of goes back to the guardrails conversation and about the expectations at every level, that it isn't different. And really when you look at disruptive technology implementation in schools, and I don't mean that in a negative connotation, but AI is certainly disruptive. And there's 3 different paths you can take. You know, the first path is, you know, bury your head in the sand and say, this is going to go away, or I'm not going to do this. You have, you know, the other side of the continuum, which is, you know, the wild, wild west, and we don't have any rules, and we're just going to allow it to happen how it happens, or we're fearful of it, and so we just kind of push it to the side. Or there's somewhere in the middle, which I would hope where we all fall, which is to establish what those expectations are so that it can be used as the tool it's designed to be, in an ethical manner, in a way that's preparing them for every level in front of them.
Thank you for that. And I know that's true throughout higher education. I hear about it, I know about it. Let's talk a little bit about how do we really move the needle. So the question is, we know that training and upskilling our employees are just kind of one piece of this puzzle, but true engagement, their programs and activities help leaders and managers drive awareness, adoption within their organization and schools. We know that there's early adopters, and we know that there's maybe slower adopters out there. From the 4 of you, what perspectives have you seen? You know, Rob, you talked about all the expectations on teachers. You're going to have those that are early adopters and those that maybe are a little bit lagging. How do we bring everyone along in a thoughtful way? And I think we talk about trust in this space, right? The people component of trusting the tools, trusting the opportunity. We were joking backstage, we were talking about, you know, email and how we had some concerns about that when that came out and those kind of things. So talk about how you develop that across the board when you're trying to, you know, bring in a large-scale adoption of things like AI.
Yeah, I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all. I think it's very intentional. We talked earlier about some of those tenured employees, some of those that maybe have unique experiences and exposure. We've seen a variety of different opportunities at Crystal. We've got some great innovators there who have joined us this morning, and you know, they see that opportunity. We challenge individuals. You know, sometimes it's required. Sometimes it's finding the opportunity to inspire growth within an individual or within a department where its use can be demonstrated. So I really think it's use case. I think it's
sharing.
Correct.
Yeah, building that trust. Others?
I guess I would say, you know, whether you're talking teachers, students, or parents, it's listening. What are the needs that they see, but what are their fears, and how can you support them? Listen to what their concerns are, and how can you then problem solve around what those concerns are. AI, we've heard a lot already, and everybody in this room already knows this isn't something that is going to go away. This is something we need to adapt and support learners at the next level. It's how are we going to support and communicate with our parents? How are we going to support and drive the capacity or build the capacity of our teachers to use AI as the tool it's designed, and how are we going to support learners to use it in the way that it's designed? But you know, we have, you know, in the K-12 space, we have teachers that are fearful too, and that's why the things that I'm talking about, the frameworks and the guardrails at each level, like I said, I use that example, the red light, yellow light, green light. You know, what is expected at this level from a teacher standpoint, from a student standpoint? What's not allowed at this level, and what is allowed with conditions? That's the framework that I think supports teachers to use and build on their knowledge, but also our parents, so they can support their own learners and then their learners themselves.
I want to add a couple of things. First of all, the AI Ready America initiative, I think it's important for people to know it, hear it, understand what the intention is. And the intention is this engagement where whether you're a Main Street business in a rural community in North Dakota or a mid-sized business here in Fargo or wherever, you're welcome to the table. And to be honest, when my collaborators up at UND and I thought about this, we said we are not the right people to lead this, because it's not like we have a lot of administrators sitting around with extra time. We don't. And it isn't what we do on the daily. But we have a lot of subject matter experts and expertise. So that's why we went to CTB and to TechND and to the Commerce Department and said, somebody else needs to lead this hub. And it needs to be a connector, it needs to be a network building, it needs to be a trust building entity. And so we make sure everyone's welcome to the table. I want to just, who in the room knows about the TEDCon Institute? Anyone? One hand? One hand, all right. So this, we could talk about national market trends and upskilling. And I think, Saul Khan and Amit and Chris over at TED, so it's ETS, the Educational Testing Center, it's Khan Academy, and it's TED, the TEDx you know and love, that brings big ideas to the world. They are creating and seeking accreditation for a bachelor's degree in AI applied science. They are working with industry. They have the backing of Bain Capital, because Amit was at Bain for a while. Microsoft's at the table. Google's at the table. This will come online in 2027. It will cost $10,000, fixed fee, and we are not talking about the time for butts in seats. We are talking about a mastery program. So competency-based mastery programs with real-life industry, case studies, and engagement, and teamwork. So to me, that means there's opportunities for people to be doing this at home, at their own time. Even people with PhDs might do this. Come back, get a bachelor's degree in applied AI. So this landscape's going to change really quickly. They are off and running. They're creating curriculum. They're engaging industry. And that is the way that this is going to roll out, these other opportunities that, you think that we're the cruise liners, we can't make turns. We also don't want to be the jet ski, because we don't want to chase trends that are going to be gone 9-10 months from now. So higher ed has to, stay the course to our mission, because quite honestly, when AI gets so smart that they can crack the algorithms that have our grid secure, our phones secure, you're not going to be running to the AI applied engineers, you're going to be running to the mathematicians.
Thank you for that, Heidi. Josh?
If I can have a capstone, this moment requires a village. And I think the one thing we're really good at in this area is coming together and rallying around topics. And I would say this one is more difficult than most, because if you spend any time on a coast, you realize that they have a head start, a running head start, because the expertise lies there. The true expertise lies in research institutions and corporate America. And so the expertise that we do have here, I hope that we can work together, guide a path forward, or guide each other on a path forward. And I'll give a call out. I was part of an event very recently that brought a variety of stakeholders together, and it was at the Graham Farm facility, and we need more of that, because it was a closed door, candid conversation that didn't leave that room, but it had all of the necessary stakeholders for true action to come about from that. And I would also say this is no good time to have state boundaries be barriers or prohibitive to us working together.
Yeah, I think some of our systems aren't really catching up. There was a question, and I appreciate the converse perspective that this question brings, is why are we focusing so heavily on updating people or society for AI versus adapting AI to integrate natively into existing frameworks? This gets a little bit more technical than I can go to. So I'm going to throw that out to you first, Josh.
I have a different take on AI, and it is that I think of it as we as mankind chose to create an intelligence outside of ourselves for the first time. And so how are you going to guide that intelligence through its infancy into being a toddler and growing up to eventually become an adult that is measured by general intelligence, right? I think that is us working together. And I agree that you don't necessarily want the tools to dictate the people, and yet if we go back to our conversation on open models, there is not the wherewithal right now to modify that at scale. So I choose to take the hand of that toddler, that AI, and guide it forward in the most responsible manner possible, because I think that's our only real option, especially from the general masses at this point in time. But I think it does beckon a question about the future as to just how much potential there is for us as rank and file human beings to have an influence on what our AI counterpart is doing as an intelligence and how it affects our life.
Thank you for that. Well, we're getting close to the end, so I think the four of you know I'm always all about a rapid fire question. So let's end a little bit where we began. So Ben, I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence. Our region will succeed in an AI-enabled economy if we
are adaptable.
Heidi?
Can you say it again?
Yeah. Our region will succeed in an AI-enabled economy if we
get engaged.
There.
If we are opportunistic.
I think you should start at the end next time.
Noted.
I think if we work together, right? If we understand, where the perspective lies for all of us. We all represent different walks of life and different stakeholder groups, and we need to understand that this isn't just a really narrow topic that affects you in the way that it affects you, but it's really a broad, it's a broad situation. We need to really think big.
Anyone want to change their answer? All right. Well, thanks again. We've reached our time together on the stage this morning, and really want to thank you for sharing your expertise and perspective. And I think all of us would agree, no one's an expert on this, but we all have lived experience and some knowledge that we can definitely share. So I think that if there's one takeaway that I continually hear related to workforce, it is not just about the technology, it's about being enabled for the future, but it's about the people that bring us to that future together, using those tools, using those skills that we're giving to them to ensure that they're adaptable into the future. And as we continue to look ahead, our next session really does invite us to think bigger, and think bigger about those individuals. Signals for the Future is going to be designed this morning to challenge assumptions, spark some new ideas, which we already had some this morning, and expand our perspectives on the trends in which we're seeing AI is exploding with. So shifts in innovation and shaping what's next is really about what our next conversation is. So let's turn our attention to today's realities for tomorrow's possibilities. Thank you again, all of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage John Deere's Manager of Strategic Manufacturing, VAO, and Digital Products, Monty Fisher.
Good morning, everyone. So my conversation today is going to be a little bit less intense than everybody else's, a little bit more casual. It's really about a problem that's showing up recently in our corporations when we try and integrate AI into our usage. And this is called the acceleration problem. It's really where technology, the adoption of it, is no longer the bottleneck, but we're running into more of a human adaptation problem. So, does anybody here know what Moore's Law is? It's kind of a fundamental basis for computing, right? Every 24 months, compute power, compute speed doubles. Well, that's been something that's been in place for almost 40 years. It's changed. AI has broken that barrier. The technologies that's used to support it and the fundamental access that it provides has shrunk that down to 7 months, hence acceleration. And as humans, we're really not ready for it. We are no longer waiting on technology, right? It is waiting on us. We have to figure out how we're going to use it, right? And this acceleration problem is showing up in corporations because when you implement AI, it happens instantaneously, overnight. You can flip a switch, turn it on a web app, it's there. You don't have to implement a server, there's no hardware. You don't have to wait for an AFE or a budget constraint. Here it is. So one of the things that we did at John Deere this year is we said we're going to give everybody access to Copilot, right? We're also going to give them training, tons and tons of training, by the way, compliance, guidance, and then a path forward as you completed your training to higher level functioning models, right? So again, those that wanted to excel could excel. Those that just needed it for base learning could use it. What we expected was, hey, step function improvement, right? That's what our goal is. We want to improve productivity. What we really saw was it didn't happen. What we got was a mirror. It showed us where we were still slow, where we had problems with fuzzy processes, messy day-to-day activities. People reverted back to being slow and methodical, and they really didn't want to try fast and creative because it was scary, right? We didn't give them this environment. So just working with our groups there and our HR teams, we said, hey, what is our problem? And we looked at it and said, for transformation to really happen and for people to really buy in, we need to teach them how to communicate, learn, trust, and redesign their work with this tool. It can't just be here it is, and now we're going to execute. So enter the human operating model, right? 4 key capabilities that people can use to help keep pace with new technology without burning out, which is the key part, right? Everybody can cram a night in, catch up on work, but if you have to feel like you're going to do that every single day, you don't feel like using the tool. So one of the first things you needed to do was listen better. And that wasn't listening to somebody giving a big speech or telling you exactly what to do. It was really talking to the people who are using the tools and or doing the work to get a better understanding. Secondly, you needed to learn faster. What we learned was, out of this, was what you know today is actually worth less than what you're going to learn tomorrow, because AI changed the rules, right? We're accelerating. Technology is pushing us faster and faster. So those people who are knowledge holders, right, the more you work or longer you work at a company, the more knowledge you have, the more value you have. What do we do with those people, right? Well, I don't know if anybody's used AI, but it tends to hallucinate at times, right? Or it tends to tell you this perfect solution that actually isn't even possible, right? So we needed to use those knowledge key leaders to help say, hey, it's technically possible, but it's not a wise decision. And then we needed to build trust. Trust with our team members that they're not building their replacement, right? They're not creating a tool or a bot that's going to replace them. It's really about productivity. They hit on it in a couple other conversations where, hey, as we keep growing and adding more and more technology, we just have different jobs. We have more jobs and different jobs. But as leaders, we also needed to take a different approach, right? We couldn't just hand them a better tool and expect something different to happen. So one of the things that we did identify was adaptation needs a psychologically safe space. And we were the ones who needed to create it. We needed to create clarity in defining what the problem was, what decisions we were really driving, and what are we trying to improve? How are we going to impact the customer? Also giving them permission to fail, to ask basic questions. It's not stupid. And you might ask it 20 times because when you get 10 questions into something with AI, and you're like, hey, wait, what was I really trying to do with it? Sometimes you need to get recentered. And then be present. You couldn't just give a big speech, walk away. You need to guide with questions. You needed to repeat what matters, make sure they keep hearing the same thing, and then defining what is changing and, more important, what is not changing. And then provide a little bit of humility to that situation. Let them know that you're also learning, right? You're making mistakes along the way too, so we all need to adapt. So here's the opportunity, adaptation velocity, which is really defined as the speed at which an organization turns new capability into better processes, decisions, behaviors, and outcomes. Again, it's not going and saying, hey, Gemini is better than Claude. That's not the separator. It's how you can use that tool and implement it within the people and have them believe they're doing the right thing. So here's what I would ask. I would ask that we stop asking what technology we should adopt, but ask whether we can adapt as fast as it accelerates. And to do that, we're really going to have to make sure that we have more transparency on our teams, we make faster decisions, we have better cross-functional collaboration, right? These team members need to know when they're sharing information back and forth, that AI tool is really just in support of you. It's not it's enhancing what you're doing. Make sure that you're using a different way to train people. We're not getting people into a room for 2 days to learn a whole new system, right? That's boring. Half hour a day, right? Just keep going at it, keep working, right? Little by little, 1%, 1%, 1% every day. Lastly, I want to challenge everybody here to learn fast, to think faster and trust more, and to push that down to your team members, because as leaders, they need to hear that from you. They need to know what's going to happen, even if they define a tool and it works well, or if they try and define a tool and it doesn't work well. As long as they don't quit using it, as long as they know that that challenge is out there and they stay involved, then you've won. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage City of Harwood Mayor Blake Henke.
All right, thank you for the applause. I never thought, being the mayor of Harwood, I'd be speaking here today, so I appreciate that. We had a unique experience in Harwood. Obviously, we've kind of become synonymous with Applied Digital. Everyone knows that's where Applied Digital's AI data center is. It's going to be built in the city of Harwood. So how did that happen? How did it come to be? What challenges have we had, both positive and negative, right? So like any small town, our biggest concerns at our council meetings from concerned citizens were, should we have chickens in town? Okay. Fireworks ordinance, barking dogs. People would knock on my door. There's someone speeding down my house, right? We're a small community. And then I get the call. I get the call from Joe, I think it's Razzo. And he said, I've got something coming to Harwood, millions of dollars for your community. Oh, I thought it was a scam. I'm like, sure, yeah, absolutely. And then I got a call from the attorney with Applied Digital. And again, I will say this publicly, Applied Digital has been great to work with. And her name's Janelle Combs, and she said, I'd like to meet and talk with you. I'm like, okay. So I sat down and talked with her in the middle of a farm field on a minimum maintenance road, now where the data center is. And we talked through it a little bit, and it did sound like something that at least we needed to explore and bring to council and bring to our community. And so then we get into the issue of the non-disclosures, and that's a hot topic, right? Non-disclosure agreements, okay? I signed one, right? And I was pretty careful before I did it. I talked to our city attorney. We took a look at the pros and cons of signing it. And really, at the end of the day, it was, there's no issue with signing it and just hearing what they have to say. And so I did. And I don't know, within a couple days, I'm traveling to Ellendale to see what their facility is like, to talk to the Ellendale's mayor, right? After that, it's time to tell council kind of what's going on, right? And I will be real candid about this, and I've spoken publicly about this. I didn't feel great about signing it. I really didn't. It's not because I don't appreciate what they do. It's a publicly traded company. It's because I was the only one in the whole city of Harwood that knew what was going on. Council didn't know. Well, I should say our city attorney knew, but besides us, no one else knew. And so we had an executive session where I was able to inform council what's going on. This is what the situation is. This is what they'd like to build here. I've been to Ellendale. And that was kind of the real moment, like this thing could really come to Harwood. And what we did is we were very, I think proactive. We're always going to get criticized. Nobody's going to be happy. If you ask all the people that were yelling and screaming at our meetings, that the majority are not from Harwood. I will say that. Paid protesters, people from other areas. I've had death threats. People have wished ill to me and my family. I still get them. I still get emails, right? And the nastiness of people is one thing that I don't think you can prepare anybody for. But we had councilmen, and there's a council member here right now, Chris Higgins. Chris? Yeah, he's right here. I'd like to acknowledge Chris. He was very vital in this as well. Chris went to Ellendale with a sound meter, right, so he could hear how loud it was. Chris was on message boards, on Facebook message boards with community members of Ellendale to say, hey, what are your experiences, good and bad? And that was just one example of kind of what we did. Other council members, I guess, did other things as well, just to kind of see if it was feasible. And we were up against something else with Harwood. And if you followed the news at all, Mayor Mahoney and I weren't friends for a while. I don't know who followed that or saw that, all right? So we were at a little bit of a unique perspective because Fargo was trying to take this from us, right? And once this became public and it got really out in the community, people were concerned, rightfully so. Some of our residents, we have a very good resident in Harwood right now, Mark Kirklevic. He's right here in green. Mark, I wanted to point you out. Okay, I'd like to point out residents like Mark. Why? Because he educated himself. He went to meetings. He went to the town halls. He did the research, right? And I think that's very important for any resident in any community and is able to have an informed decision. And so, I guess the reason that I'm bringing that up and I'm bringing Mark up is there was so much of a knee-jerk reaction and non-education, right? But back to what I was going through with Fargo. So when our citizens kind of found out that Fargo wants this, wow, our town bonded together. Go Harwood, we're getting Fargo, right? 100%, right? And so there's kind of this shift in the community where now we want it in Harwood. Fargo's not going to steal it from us. It's ours, right? And so I think that helped us, as far as getting the community to bond together around the project. And so, what are well, I guess next in line for us, it's the middle of a farm field, okay? We had to rezone it. Okay, so the first thing that was done was Applied Digital submitted an application to rezone our farmland into industrial. And we have a planning and zoning committee. They unanimously approved it. It came to council. We unanimously approved it, right? And that kind of paved the way for, what's now Applied Digital. They submitted their building permits and so on and so forth. Well, a town of our size is not equipped to manage our building inspectors. That's not what we expect as a building inspector in a town of 940 people, right? A $3 billion data center. So we did hire that out, right, just to kind of get it away from us. We hired Midwest Inspections. They're the ones that handle all the checks and balances on the data center. We don't try to do that in-house. I think for smaller communities, that's important. Now, the next question I get asked quite a bit. So I would say the cons are the public backlash, the paid protesters that were there, the death threats, the on-education. If I have to get asked one more time about water usage, wow. Okay, the three things, right? And Martin talked about this too, and I've gotten to know Martin pretty well over the last year. But water usage, noise, right? Those are the two big things that we hear, right? And then, well, I'm missing one here. Martin, help me out. Water usage, noise, electricity, thank you. And Paul was very helpful on that, coming out right away. Paul Mathis was right away. He was helpful on that and said, your rates will not increase because of this data center. Well, after that, he came out publicly and was on the news and in the paper. I still had to answer that question, I don't know, 100 times? It was just incredible. So that's I guess, a downfall too, is just people not educating themselves and just asking the same questions repeatedly, right? So the public backlash, the ill will, we don't want change. Okay, and I think that's the biggest downfall, at least that I have had. What are the positives? Okay, I can't sit up here and tell you the positives aren't going to be money, right? They generate a lot of money for a small town. They're going to generate a lot of money for the city of Harwood. And what do? Right? And so I can tell you what we've done. Not that this is right for every community, but this is what we've done. We created a committee to try to look at what our town needs as we grow and expand. How is our infrastructure going to handle what we have going on? So we worked with our city engineer, Andrew Ockery over at Moore Engineering, and he came up with a list of things for a community improvement plan. And then, again, I'm glad Chris was here. I didn't know he was going to be here. He heads that committee. So we have a committee with Harwood residents as to what are our needs in the community, right? And so we're hoping to use the money that we're going to be getting from Applied Digital to help oversee and help guide what the community wants as a whole from the money that we never thought we would be getting, right? The other issue that we have as a small community where we're located, the diversion. We know we're going to grow after the diversion. We've been told that for years. Prepare yourself, and we're trying to. And we're going to try to use the money that we didn't expect we would get from Applied Digital to help prepare ourselves, to come up with a community improvement plan, and to try to look forward rather than just kind of take it as it comes. And so I think those are the biggest pros and cons that we have had, but it's been a process, and it's not stopping now. We still deal with it every council meeting. We would have, Chris, back me up, we'd have 2 people at council meetings, maybe 3, right, for years. And all of a sudden now, we pretty much are going to start to have them in our community center, right, because it's full every single meeting. So that's certainly been a change, but you know, as we look forward, you know, I get asked pretty regularly, you know, what I've done differently, what would the community have done differently? And I'd be hard pressed to say I would do anything differently. I thought we were diligent, I thought we were careful, I thought we did our homework, I thought our citizens did their homework, and town halls are important. Get the message out there. Applied Digital holds town halls. I appreciate them for doing that. We can't hold them as council members because there's a quorum and there's city council meetings, and so we can't do it. So Applied Digital did hold lots of, not lots, but enough meetings to get the community together to ask any of the questions that anyone wanted to ask. And I think that's important to get the message out there. I think really the biggest thing is to educate people like we had to do. We had to educate ourselves on data centers, benefits to the community, negatives to the community. So that's the biggest takeaway that I have is if this is coming to your community, educate yourself. So that's all I really have. I never expected to speak at an event like this. But I'm appreciative for the opportunity. And if anyone has any questions, the mayor of Ellendale was great when we were going through this. When I was, you'd have a question to reach out to him, ask him questions, you know, good, bad, or otherwise. Excuse me. And so if anyone has questions about, you know, if this is going to a small town or anything with data center related that I could be of help, please do. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce Vice President of Workforce, Dr. Jane Vangsness-Frisch.
Well, it certainly has been a wonderful morning. We've explored infrastructure powering AI's future, discussed policy, and examined how education, workforce, and industry must work together to prepare people, all of us, together for what's ahead. We are also challenged a bit to think a little bit differently about the trends, some technologies that are coming out, and obviously the shifts that will shape the next decade. Each conversation had its different perspectives. A common theme truly emerged from what I could tell, is that the future is not something that happens to us. It truly is something that we have the opportunity to shape through not only ourselves, but the next generation. Our success and competitiveness will not be defined by technology alone. They're determined by the choices we make, the partnerships that we continue to build, and our willingness to invest in each other, the infrastructure, and the innovation itself. We are fortunate, I think, to live and work in a region defined truly by collaboration. It is very unique to where we're at in the upper Midwest of this culture of collaboration. We have our forward-thinking businesses that we're so fortunate to have, our exceptional educational institutions, along with all their fabulous mascots, which we heard about, our engaged community leaders, and the people who are willing truly to come together and solve some of those challenges. The work belongs to all of us, and it is truly ahead of us. Whether you're leading a business, educating that future next generation, developing those workforce solutions, or influencing policy, and or strengthening our community just by being engaged, each of us has a role to creating the future that we want to see. So today's conversations are coming to an end. The work and possibilities are just beginning. First, we know that some of you are looking forward to continuing this work and seeing how we can shape the next steps through this afternoon at our AI and Practice workshop at Microsoft Commons. Also, in an effort to be responsive, the Chamber is partnering with the U.S. Chamber Foundation to bring some more just-in-time AI training to our community. Watch for more information coming out in October. That will be in late October. We're very excited about the possibility and very thankful for all of our great partnerships that have brought this just-in-time training to our community. So this afternoon, I hope you all have a wonderful workshop. And truly, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being engaged. Thank you for willing to have these conversations. And thank you for being willing to invest in our region. Have a great afternoon.